just by the runway, you can see 3 vehicles standing by. We understand that is roughly where the royal plane will end up today, although there could be changes due to the weather. We're not sure as of now, but again, we are expecting that flight any minute now.
Well, that's the situation there at Aberdeen Airport. David, if there's any development, we'll come to you straight away. David Shanks, our colleague there at Aberdeen, and so they're standing by, Nick, aren't they? And it seems that will be, what were you saying, about an hour to get
I would have thought
Balmoral?
so. Yeah, in the rather inclement weather, they won't want to rush too much. I'm just trying to figure out who the 7 members of the royal family rather than the royal household, I would have thought. And this is just me speculating, but off the top of my head, one imagines that it might be the Duke of York, the Earl and Countess of Wessex. Now, the Princess Royal, I think, is
yes,
up there.
Yes.
The Duke of Cambridge, travelling without Catherine, she's remaining at Windsor. We remember, of course, that their 3 children have just started at their new school, so it wouldn't be a good time for both of them to disappear from their new home in Windsor. And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Now, that makes 6, so I'm just puzzling a little bit who the 7th might be. It could, of course, be the Earl of Snowdon, and we mustn't forget the other branches of the family who are all as equally involved and concerned, of course, as the members of the royal family themselves. But so that is, as you say, the situation. They have got at least a 45-minute road journey ahead of them, and as I say, it just may be that we will have to wait until they have arrived there and the family has had a chance just to be together before we learn anything further. But I do stress that is just me speculating about that.
You were talking earlier about Prince of Wales, who's been with Camilla in residence at Birkhall, which is not far away from Balmoral. But the understanding was that the Prince of Wales actually spent quite a lot of time with Her Majesty in recent weeks.
As I understand it, he's been dropping in most days. It is just a few miles from Birkhall to Balmoral Castle itself, and it would just, I think, be natural that he would wish to be spending as much time with his mother as possible, particularly if, as clearly has been the case, her health has been a matter of concern in recent times. So I think both Charles and Camilla have been there, and we saw, of course, Charles and Camilla at the Braemar gathering on Saturday, but the Queen was not there for these reasons of comfort connected to the mobility issue. But as we understand it, Charles and presumably Camilla as well are at Balmoral, presumably with the Princess Royal, now awaiting those other members of the royal family who will shortly, we would expect, to be boarding those 3 vehicles there, which are waiting on the tarmac at Aberdeen Airport. But of course it is all rather more complicated by the weather up there.
Yes.
Liz Truss's aircraft was delayed by fog, had to circle around several times before it was able to land on Tuesday. And it was torrential rain, I know, because I was standing in it outside Balmoral. And so that makes that drive just not necessarily hazardous, but they will need to take care. It's not the sort of drive that they can do at breakneck speed.
We're told that the plane is approaching, Nick, so, and clearly, as you've said quite a few times, not easy to spot what's approaching in this weather. But I'm told it's within a minute of arrival, apparently. So let's hope that we can spot it as it comes. And if you're just joining us and watching these images and wondering what's going on, well, we're reporting on concerns for the Queen's health, and linked to that, the arrival of 7 members of the royal family in a flight that is about to land here at this location, which is Aberdeen Airport, which is not too far from Balmoral Castle, the Queen's estate in Aberdeenshire, where the Queen's been in residence since the month of July. The usual summer stay for the royal family in Balmoral, which has been going on despite the Queen's clear health issues. And that is why the Queen's been cared for there. She's getting all the care and attention that you'd expect from a very expert team of doctors and nurses and other experts. That's all happening at Balmoral Castle itself. It's not happening at the infirmary, the Royal Infirmary in Aberdeen. The Queen's been cared for at home, so to speak, a summer home, which she's very fond of, so she'll be feeling very much happy in the surroundings. We hope comfortable and not in any discomfort or pain, clearly. So the palace statement earlier was quite clear. It said that the Queen was resting and was comfortable, and that the doctors were nonetheless expressing concern about her health.
And I think, given the level of concern that there will be in this country and indeed around the world, in the Commonwealth and more widely, I would think that Buckingham Palace would have to say something, because otherwise, you know, if there is a vacuum, it will be filled by rumours, and there are already any number of rumours out there, and we must just stick to the facts, and we look to Buckingham Palace clearly to give us the facts. Because an awful lot of people, millions and millions of people, will be tuning in now, wanting to know how the Queen is.
So this is the scene at Aberdeen Airport in the northeast of Scotland. At Aberdeen Airport, no stranger to weather which is, let's say, just a bit challenging. Today it is wet and it is foggy and it is possibly windy as well. And we can see an aircraft approaching.
An RAF, it looks like the same aircraft that was used on Tuesday.
That's right.
A Falcon, I gather. But that is certainly not a commercial flight. That is, looks absolutely like the kind of RAF aircraft that would be used in a situation such as this. One of their smaller executive passenger aircraft to bring these members of the royal family, we must assume, up to Aberdeen and then on to Balmoral, so that they can be at the bedside of their mother or their grandmother.
So touchdown at Aberdeen. In all likelihood, this is the plane carrying 7 members of the royal family, and it's just touched down, and I'm sure it'll be a fairly swift transfer from the aircraft to the vehicles that are waiting there just off the runway to take the members of the royal family, whoever they are. But Nick gave us a very credible list just now, and to take them over to Balmoral itself and to see how Her Majesty is doing, and to be present at the bedside there in Aberdeen, and to just monitor the Queen's care. So we think the Prince of Wales is certainly there already, Princess Royal too. But we think that this plane has brought up possibly the Duke of Cambridge and the Earl of Wessex, possibly the Countess of Wessex, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and the Duke of York probably as well. So we can't confirm the list, but if we can, we'll tell you right away. But the aircraft is now just taxiing and approaching the terminal building, and that is where the fleet of cars we saw earlier has stopped. But as we were discussing earlier, they'll now want to make pretty good progress on this road from Aberdeen, some 45 miles or so from Aberdeen to Balmoral itself. And it's a journey that you've undertaken, Nick, and I'm just wondering, is that a journey that is fairly straightforward or not?
Well, it's quite a windy road, and there are still quite a few tourists around, and as we were saying, it's clearly very wet up on D side at the moment. It's a very picturesque journey. It's a journey that all these members of the royal family will be well used to. They won't be driving, of course. They will have chauffeurs who will also be very used to it, and I would imagine that those vehicles have probably come out from Balmoral in order to pick them up, so they will be very used to the journey from Dice, which is where, of course, Aberdeen Airport is situated, through some towns, rather delightful towns with some quaint names, Campus of May and a few others I can't just remember, until they get to Crathy. Crathy, the church there, of course, where the royal family worships on a Sunday when they're at Balmoral Castle, and immediately opposite that into Balmoral Castle and the estate itself, where the Queen has spent so many happy months over the years of her reign. So Aberdeen Airport still busy with its normal commercial traffic, but this aircraft presumably now approaching where those vehicles are parked.
So 3 vehicles, we think, are standing by, which would easily accommodate, obviously, 7 members of the royal family. If it is 7, there may be 1 or 2 members of the royal household with them.
Quite possibly, yes. And I think the names that we mentioned a moment ago would seem to be the most likely passengers, and together with the late Princess Margaret's children, the Earl of Snowdon and Sarah Armstrong-Jones, who, of course, also very close to the Queen. So they would, I'm sure, wish to be there. And indeed many other members of the royal family, but I think these are the most immediate ones, obviously the children, the grandchildren, the nephews and nieces. But we perhaps will get a chance to see ourselves in just a moment.
Well, we may get a glimpse. I mean, it all depends, of course, where the aircraft comes to rest, and our line of sight might be blocked somewhat, but if we can see it, we'll do our best. Just carrying on down to where the agreed stop is, just at going back towards the landing position on the runway, but coming over to the left-hand side, and we'll stop fairly shortly, I think, because the vehicles we saw were parked just a few metres away from this kind of area.
I think we can be certain that the Duke of Cambridge, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, and the Duke of York are on the aircraft. The Duke of Cambridge without Catherine, as we mentioned. Not quite sure who else may be on the aircraft.
Do you think the Sussexes will have come on the same?
Well, it would be logical, wouldn't it? And this, of all moments, is a moment for rapprochement, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
The coming together of the family. A sense of perspective, perhaps, may have overtaken them if they are coming up to see their ailing grandmother. But we have a very clear sight of it, unless it's about to disappear around a corner. But so we will see who's on the aircraft. But the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, of course, fortuitously just happen to be in this country at the moment. So it would seem to be logical that they too would wish to join other members of the immediate family in heading up to Balmoral Castle. So there are a couple of Range Rovers and another vehicle.
So, given the arrangements there, it'll be a very quick transfer, won't it, really? Once they're out of the aircraft, they'll be in the vehicle straight away and on their way, I'd imagine.
They will. Now, from which side of the aircraft are they going to disembark? I mean, it might just be if it's the far side that we won't... Oh, no.
No, it looks like this side, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the car's just pulling up. So let's keep a sharp eye on who's likely to emerge.
So whoever it is will be joining the Prince of Wales or the...
So we're told, Nick, I think, that 4 of the royals on the plane are William, Andrew, Edward and Sophie.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Steps are coming down pretty swiftly. So, not sure if we can have a slightly closer look, but here we are. So we're looking for the Duke of Cambridge, Duke of York, the Earl and Countess of Wessex. So 2 of the Queen's children, daughter-in-law and grandson. And that's our colleague Daniela Ralph suggesting that list for us.
Yeah.
But in line with what you were saying earlier, Nick.
So, the RAF officer, the pilot perhaps, has taken his position at the side of the steps, ready to salute. Goodness me, it's hard to tell, isn't it?
Very difficult to tell, yeah.
No, I think those are protection officers. Duke of Cambridge.
Yes. That's Duke of Cambridge just emerged from the aircraft.
Countess of Wessex, I suspect.
And we think the Countess of Wessex.
Wessex. Gosh.
That looks like the Duke of York, I think, doesn't it?
Yes.
I think it's the Duke of York. And we caught a glimpse of the... I think we saw the Earl of Wessex as well.
Yeah, we did. Yes. Who is that? Well, I'm sorry, I can't identify who that is.
I can't either.
Maybe an official or another policeman, though he was getting into the back of the car.
I don't think that was a royal.
No, I would imagine that Tim Lawrence, the Princess Royal's husband, is up there with her. Anyway, they're off, speeding away.
So they've landed, and we certainly think that that now comprises Duke of Cambridge, Duke of York, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, and they will now be making their way rather swiftly to Balmoral.
Yeah, now if our eyesight was true, there was no Duke and Duchess of Sussex there.
No.
Unless we just weren't able to spot them, but we were both looking pretty hard, and I must say I couldn't see them, so maybe they are making separate arrangements, so maybe there hasn't been any chance for a conversation aboard that aircraft, and no sign that I could see of Princess Margaret's children, so it appeared to be just the 4 members of the royal family, didn't it? So it will be, well, certainly I would say 45 minutes before they now reach Balmoral, and they will have a chance then to be appraised of the latest situation, whatever that is. They will have been summoned clearly this morning. It will have taken just a little bit of time to get this aircraft sorted out and to bring them all together and to set in motion the logistics of getting them up there. And we must now wait. We must just keep our concern to ourselves and wait for any definite information.
You're watching BBC News. If you're just joining us, this is our special coverage of events in Aberdeenshire, principally, where the Queen is in residence at Balmoral, where her doctors have expressed concern about her health. And we are covering events there, and of course back in London as well, and at Windsor. A statement from Buckingham Palace released earlier this afternoon around lunchtime, saying that the 96-year-old monarch was placed under supervision after further evaluation, but that she did remain comfortable. That was the word used. And the BBC understands that now all 4 of the Queen's children are either at the Balmoral estate or they are now travelling there, because we've just seen some arrivals at Aberdeen. The Prince of Wales went to Balmoral with his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, and in the past few minutes we've seen a group of the royal family touching down at Aberdeen Airport, and they're already on their way to the Balmoral estate. Reactions to the Queen's health and to the concerns about it have come in since that statement at just after midday today. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who only a couple of days ago was meeting the Queen at Balmoral, said the whole country will be deeply concerned by this news. And she said her thoughts, and those of everyone in the UK and the Commonwealth, are with the Queen and her family. And we are in a position now, I think, to talk to our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, who can join us. And Fergus, the question lots of viewers are asking this afternoon, and understandably so, asking questions about what doctors mean by comfortable, and when they talk about medical supervision, how intensive a supervision might that be, for example. They want to know about, trying to understand the phraseology being used.
Absolutely, Hugh. I think what we can say here is that the Palace have gone far further than they ever normally do. They normally don't give updates on members of the royal family's health, but the key phrase in the brief statement today was that doctors were concerned for Her Majesty's health. And then you've seen the arrival of key members of her family, her children, going to Balmoral now. And it is a shock for everybody because we've all lived our lives with the Queen as a permanent fixture. She's 96 years old and she's been in remarkably good health for pretty much all of that reign, only recently with those sporadic mobility issues. And just one thing, I mean, if you think that she has appointed 15 Prime Ministers, Hugh, over the years, the first one being Winston Churchill, who was born, I think, in 1874, and the latest, earlier this week, Liz Truss, who was born 101 years later. So that just gives you a sense of her longevity in terms of her service to the country. And she has had remarkably few health incidents until very recently. She spent a night in hospital in 2013, but I think with gastroenteritis. She's had a couple of minor operations, but apart from that, she has been in really robust health until the last year or so.
When we talk about people who are 96 years of age, Fergus, clearly it is no surprise that their health issues may well be accumulating. When we've talked about the Queen's mobility issues, that's a phrase, of course, used by Buckingham Palace itself. Again, that's given rise to some speculation. What is your guidance to viewers on that phrase, mobility issues?
Well, again, I have no special insights here on this, Hugh, because the Palace plays this very close to their chest. We saw her, we could all see in those photos earlier this week where she was greeting Liz Truss that she had a walking stick, but we've also seen some of the mobility issues that she's had which prevented her, for example, not attending the state opening of Parliament for the first time, I think, in around 60 years. So she is 96 and obviously she has been in remarkably good health for a 96-year-old, but the Palace has never been one to speculate or to give more than very, very short and brief statements on members of the royal family's health, and particularly the Queen's.
Fergus, many thanks for now. If there are any more points we'd like to raise in terms of questions that viewers are understandably asking, we'll be back. But thanks very much, Fergus Walsh, our medical editor. And with me here, of course, our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell, and Nick and I are doing what all of you are doing, which is waiting patiently for any news, if and when it comes. Nick, what would you say to sum up things so far?
I would say that there is deep concern. I think it is justified in saying deep concern, given the movements of the family. I think that they would only be going en masse up to Balmoral, cancelling all their scheduled engagements today, breaking into their programme to be at the bedside either of their mother or of their grandmother, if there was very real concern. I think Nicola Sturgeon used the word profound concern, and I think that that is the case. We have not been in this situation before, Hugh. We are in unknown territory, really, now, in which the head of state, our Queen for 70 years, is clearly suffering from significant health issues, sufficiently significant for her doctors to issue really an unprecedented statement expressing concern at her health, though adding that she was comfortable and is remaining at Balmoral. There appears to be no question of moving her to hospital. Now, this comes after several days during which we've seen, if you like, clues that the health situation was heading in a negative direction. The fact that she couldn't go to London for the appointment of the new Prime Minister, the fact that that Privy Council meeting last night had to be cancelled, and that she had been ordered to rest by her doctors. Well, that's just most unlike her. And then this news just before lunchtime today at around 12:20, the statement from Buckingham Palace concerning her health. And this after so many months when they have said absolutely a minimum of information. They just have refused to talk about it. They say, we're not giving a commentary on her health. And in a sense, I suppose they haven't had very much to say, because I don't think that there have been any significant changes up until now. Now, there are any number of rumours out there. We're not going to get into rumours. We're just going to stick to the facts. And as you said, we now must wait, along with everybody who is watching us, to see what further information may emerge. But this situation that we find ourselves in, ominously, I think we can say today, is the culmination of this sequence of events which began last October, when clearly there was some change, some worsening of her health. That moment when she had to cancel that visit to Northern Ireland, when she was taken into hospital. And although she was ordered then to undertake light duties, she did recover. There was a weight loss, and we have seen her with the stick. This is when she was visiting Thames Hospice not so many weeks ago, and you can see the weight loss there, can't you, I think, in her face. But still determined, though with her stick, and walking very carefully because of these mobility issues, but still there at the age of 96. Still keen to be out and about as head of state, meeting people, once-in-a-lifetime moments for those people at Thames Hospice, meeting the Queen, who has done so few public engagements in recent times, but they're taking an interest in people and just being the Queen. That person who is so respected, so revered, whether you are a supporter of the monarchy or whether you think that we should become a republic. I think there is a unanimous view that she has done and continues to do a quite remarkable job. And who can imagine doing this at the age of 96? She, in these images at Thames Hospice, is the one on her feet, engaging in conversation with so many people, so many tens of thousands of people whom she's met over the 70 years of her reign.
Will there ever be, you're bound to ask the question, Nick, will there ever be in future a figure who symbolises more effectively and more powerfully the sense of duty, the sense of commitment, the sense of dedication, the sense of a role that has been preordained in a way? And that is really something that lots of people today, I think, will be reflecting on.
I think it is. I think many people will be feeling, well, we will not see her like again. Now, that reign is not over. We have nothing to suggest that it is. We await any further news that there may be from Buckingham Palace. But I think that that is absolutely right. It has been a remarkable reign in so many respects, not just its longevity, the 70 years, the longest reign in British history. It is the degree of devotion that she has brought to it, the instinctive grasp that she has had of what it is that a monarch needs to represent, the humility that she has demonstrated. That really, you know, the humility is the key to why her reign has been such a success. Dutiful and steadfast and constant, but rooted in the humility that she spoke about on the evening of her coronation.
And all of this, we're talking about a remarkable person who wasn't born to this role. It's wasn't meant to be.
Absolutely, no. I mean, born just, a few months before the general strike back in 1926. And at the time of her birth, although it was suspected that perhaps things might evolve in such a way that she might end up on the throne. But at that point, of course, she was the eldest child of the king's second son. So at that point, there was no real expectation that she would succeed to the throne. But history took the turn that it did, and her father took the throne in 1936, and then, of course, that placed her in direct line to the succession and to 1952, when, of course, her father died so unexpectedly, tragically young in his 50s, and she was thrust upon the throne at the age of just 25 years old when she came to the throne, and she has reigned and continues to reign in line with that pledge that she made, that she would reign and serve the peoples of the Commonwealth throughout her life, whether it be long or short.
Well, the remarkable thing is the visit to the hospice that you showed there, Nick, was actually conveyed exactly the same sense of purpose and energy and duty and keenness to meet people that we see on old film back in the 50s.
And, you know, I think, again, one of the keys is that she enjoys it. She enjoys the role of Queen, although by instinct quite a reticent person. She has a curiosity about people and things. She likes, I think, political gossip. She's very, very circumspect about it, but she, I think, just likes to know what's going on. Yeah. She likes to know what's going on in her country, and probably, you know, she has a better opportunity than most, actually, when she was out and about regularly, of course not in the past year, to speak to so many people, and they write to her. And so, you know, she has seen it as part of her role to try to sense what is the mood, what is the feeling around the country. Now, there have been ups and downs during the reign. Of course there have. It would be remarkable, inconceivable if there hadn't been. But this is somebody who not only just, I think, enjoys the role that she finds herself in, but also has some of the characteristics of a sort of executive woman, you know, doing the job of Queen, all that paperwork, box after box, every day, you know, as they say, apart from Christmas Day, having to go through it. But, you know, there is something about her which quite enjoys being decisive, taking decisions, not political decisions, of course not, but being involved in the affairs of state and being privy to them. You know, this lady of 96 knows just about every secret there is about the United Kingdom and a few other Commonwealth countries as well, because all the state papers, she sees all of them, not just from the United Kingdom, but from the other nations of which, the 14 other nations of which she is also head of state. So sometimes I think people perhaps don't fully appreciate what does the Queen do. Well, it's this head of the nation role, but there is an awful lot of work that she does, which is not really seen by us, the public. But it fulfills an essential component in holding the nation together. You know, it is the embodiment of the crown. That is the entity to which all the principal organs of state owe their allegiance. And we shouldn't forget that, you know, and at some point in the future we will have a new monarch. And at that point, it will then be important, I think, to separate the institution from the individual. I mean, when we do reach that point, and when the crown does pass from the Queen, you know, we're not there yet, but at some point that moment will come. And inevitably, I suppose, there will then be questions about, you know, how challenging, how difficult will it be for the new monarch, for the King Charles, as we presume he will be known. But at that point, we will need to remember that for 70 years, the monarchy has been so identified with this monarch that we've perhaps forgotten what the functions of the monarch are, that it is the constitutional settlement of the United Kingdom, the embodiment of it. Anyway, that's all to come. At some point, perhaps well, who knows? At this point, we just await any further news from the palace.
Well, at Buckingham Palace itself, we can see some people gathering there. Nick, it's a wet day, so you're not going to see huge crowds right now. But there are people gathering outside the gates because, you know, word has got out that there is concern about the Queen's health, and the traditional place to gather has been in front of Buckingham Palace. And there we have a great aerial image of the palace itself, with St James's Park just over to the left, and then Green Park up to the right-hand side, and then you can see the facade of Buckingham Palace there, with the Queen Victoria Memorial dominating the front part, that part of the mall that leads down to Buckingham Palace, and then the huge garden behind. Somewhere, of course, where the Queen has spent a lot of time over the years, Nick, but it's also fair to say, I hope I'm not being unfair saying this, possibly not her favourite residence.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I think it's pretty well known. I think we're on safe territory here to say that Windsor is by far her favourite place, notwithstanding that it's directly under the flight path to Heathrow Airport. But I think she likes just the tranquillity there. It's that sense that you're not as it were, living above the shop. You know, Buckingham Palace, of course, it's having this multi-million-pound renovation at the moment, and you know, as people within the palace would say, it badly needs it because, you know, the lighting and the plumbing doesn't work terribly well. But no, I think absolutely, because don't forget, the Queen at heart is a countrywoman. You know, she enjoys the country pursuits, the dogs and the horses, as we know. So there's a much greater opportunity to do that out at Windsor with the estate there, which the Duke of Edinburgh used to manage and run. She's got horses nearby. So yes, I think understandably Windsor is her favourite residence, and that is the castle to which we would expect her to return next month from Balmoral. But as I say, we are just waiting to see what may emerge.
But as you say, Buckingham Palace's headquarters, it's the office, it's the place of work and lots of the formal state ceremony, of course. And that's why there are crowds, of course, right in central London gathered there today, because they've heard about the concerns about the Queen's health, and they've gathered there just to see if there's any news at any point. And my colleague Damien Grammaticus is also there right now. He's just outside the palace. And Damien, you were telling us earlier about the messages of support and concern that have come from different leaders. And why don't you recap on some of that? Because there will be people joining us throughout the afternoon who've not been completely across what's been going on, aware, of course, of the reports of the concerns about the Queen's health. But take us through some of the leaders' thoughts as the day's gone on.
Well, Hugh, yes, that's right. I mean, of course, the first official announcement, or the official announcement, came from here officially through Buckingham Palace about the Queen's condition, and that official announcement, just to recap as well, was talking about the fact that following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors were concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she may remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable, that announcement said. Now, when that came through, just shortly before that, news had started or ripple through the political world here in London. So in Parliament was sitting, the Prime Minister was there, the Leader of the Opposition. The news rippled through the chamber of the House of Commons as they were debating today. And very soon after, then we had that announcement from the Palace here, followed by then official announcements from those political leaders, official comments from those political leaders, and as you're saying, I'll give you a little flavour of those. So Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, who had just been to Balmoral on Tuesday to be asked by the Queen to form a government, she pretty quickly put out a statement saying the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. My thoughts and the thoughts of people across the United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family, Liz Truss said, echoed almost instantly by Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. He said, along with the rest of the country, I am deeply concerned or deeply worried by the news from Buckingham Palace. My thoughts are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family. I, along with everyone across the United Kingdom, hope for her recovery. The Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey, repeated those same statements. The nation's whole thoughts and prayers are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family. We all hope and pray for a full recovery. Those same sentiments again repeated throughout the United Kingdom. So we heard from Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland. Same sentiment again. All of us are feeling profoundly concerned that reports about Her Majesty's health. My thoughts and wishes are with the Queen and all the royal family. Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales, same again, concerned to hear the news from Buckingham Palace. Send my best wishes on behalf of the people of Wales. And from Northern Ireland, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, leader of the Democratic Unionists, repeated the same thing again. So widespread concern from them. And then following that, also from the former Prime Ministers who would come here for their weekly audiences with the Queen. So both David Cameron and Tony Blair have put out very similar messages as well. And as you were just hearing from Nicholas Witchell there, I think, so 15 Prime Ministers now the Queen has seen during her reign, Liz Truss the most recent, and Queen too, head of state for some 14 other countries, Nicholas Witchell was just saying. So the concern about her condition, for her family, extending far beyond just London, far beyond these shores, places like New Zealand, Australia, to other countries around the world where they will be watching very closely. And remember too, other British overseas territories, far from here, Gibraltar, Bermuda, places like that also have an intimate connection with the Queen and will be looking on, sharing the same concern, the same sentiments echoed by political leaders today.
Damien, thank you very much. Damien Grammaticus there with some of the expressions of concern and the wishes being sent to the Queen and the family. We are looking here at images of Balmoral Castle. This is the entrance to the estate. This is where the Queen has been in residence since the month of July. It's the traditional summer residence for the Queen in the glorious surroundings of this part of Scotland. And as we look at these images, I'm just going to talk once again to Nicholas Witchell, our royal correspondent, because there was some, lack of clarity earlier, Nick, about what the Sussexes were doing, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, who happen to be in the UK at the moment. Our understanding is, as we thought, they weren't on that aircraft, but they're on their way?
They are apparently travelling separately. So the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, yes, were not on the RAF aircraft that took the Duke of Cambridge, the Duke of York and the Earl and Countess of Wessex. Those four members of the royal family who we saw leaving the RAF aircraft at Aberdeen Airport and boarding those three vehicles which are now on their way to Balmoral. The Sussexes were not among them, but they are also travelling from London up to Aberdeen, so they will be joining the rest of the family at Balmoral Castle, but we are unaware of precisely what their travel arrangements are, whether they have their own separate private jet or whether they're boarding a commercial flight. We don't know at this stage.
So there we are, the gates of Balmoral, and this is where, Nick, we're expecting at some point to see the party that arrived at Aberdeen Airport making its way into the estate itself. As you said earlier, we've seen plenty of cars and vehicles leaving. We haven't seen many going in. But the 2 or 3 vehicles that left Aberdeen Airport a while ago, well, they should be arriving fairly soon, I'd have thought.
Yes. Whether they go in by the main entrance there or whether they use one of the other many entrances of this large estate, and it may be that they would just wish to be rather more circumspect in the circumstances and not enter via the main gates, because they will know that there are a lot of media photographers and our television cameras and so on gathered at the main gate. But we shall see. But yes, I would have thought they're travelling through these towns, Banchory and Kincardine O'Neill and Aboyne, and then to Ballater, which is the town nearest to Balmoral. It is quite a lengthy journey, so and they won't be rushing unduly given the weather.
Let's talk to our Scotland correspondent, Lorna Gordon, who's at Balmoral. And we were just mentioning the conditions there, Laura, so it won't make for a very swift journey from Aberdeen, but tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, that will be a journey of a little over an hour from Aberdeen Airport, so we would anticipate seeing those members of the royal family here at the main entrance to the Balmoral estate at around 5 o'clock or a little after. The road here is still open to the public. Traffic is passing by the front of the castle gates. There is the normal armed guard presence outside Balmoral as well. That is usual for when the Queen is in residence here. But what is unusual is that the local car park, which is often, even at this time of the year, full of cars, of members of the public enjoying the area, coming to view the front of the Balmoral estate, that has been closed to the public at this time. And of course, there are some well-wishers gathering here outside Balmoral, and there are members of the press as well. There are some members of the public here quite emotional, which is unusual for people in this part of Scotland who are quite reserved. It is fair to say, one gentleman that we spoke to earlier said he hopes Her Majesty the Queen gets some comfort from being somewhere she loves. And she does love Balmoral. She has been coming to this estate, to this part of Scotland, since she was a child. It's very secluded, it's very secure. She has a great deal of privacy here. It's an area where she takes her dogs for walks in the local hills. The family have barbecues here. People are very loyal towards both the Queen and the royal family. I think it's fair to say many people view her as their neighbour. She goes to Crathy Church on a regular basis. The local minister recently was telling me how at one point she spoke in Doric, which is the local dialect, to a lady who was at the annual church fete. So it's an area that she is extremely fond of, and it's fair to say the people here are extremely fond of the Queen in return.
Lorna, thank you so much, and we'll obviously be waiting for the arrivals of the royal family members who've just arrived in the past hour or so at Aberdeen. But while we look at these images, as I say, we are monitoring reports from Balmoral where doctors have expressed concern about the state of the Queen's health. I'm going to bring in Dr. Ed Owen, who's the royal historian and author of The Family Firm, Monarchy, Mass Media and the British Public. Dr. Owens, thank you so much for joining us. It's good to have you with us.
Good afternoon.
So we are waiting for news, Ed, I think it's fair to say. We're not speculating. We're waiting to see what the royal household tells us about what's going on. But clearly, because of the circumstances of the day, we are thinking about the immense contribution the Queen has made to public life and indeed to the life of the Commonwealth. And given what you've been writing about the royal family and what you call the family firm, what is your reflection today on what the Queen has achieved?
Well, it's days like these, Hugh, and earlier days in the year when she wasn't able to be present at key public events, those moments really bring into sharp focus the fact that this reign is drawing to a close. We've known that for some time. And it's left historians like me wondering about what is her legacy. And I think the great legacy of Elizabeth II is that really she is Britain's greatest constitutional monarch. She is the purest example of the politically neutral monarch. That has been her forte, and it's meant that her reign has been uncontentious, uncontroversial, because she hasn't voiced her political opinions.
I suppose that for lots of people, they consider that to be the ideal form of monarchy, as you say, and yet one imagines that in an age where people speculate so much, where social media can be an incredibly kind of toxic space as well, how difficult has it been for the Queen to maintain that kind of neutrality?
It's been extremely challenging, not least because we do live in a more angry age, I think it's fair to say, and politics has become polarised. There has been a movement away from the centre towards both the left and the right in recent years. And it therefore makes the job of monarch, of constitutional monarch, that much more difficult. So I think being able to be guarded in terms of voicing her opinions, that, as I say, has been her forte. Of course, there have been occasional moments, for example, in relation to Scotland, where you're reporting from today, where she has voiced subtle concerns about the state of the Union and her desire that England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland do remain together. Very rarely she has voiced concerns about that.
It's true, of course, and she did so back in 1977, which was before the 79 referendums in Wales and Scotland. So, but those were notable exceptions. I think it's fair to say there was lots of speculation, for example, around the Brexit period about what Her Majesty's views on that might or might not be. But she steadfastly really refused to be drawn on any of it.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. And as we see, no matter her political opinion, she has gone through the routine, the duty of welcoming new prime ministers into office, bidding others farewell, as we saw earlier this week. And she's done that throughout her reign, stretching right back, of course, to Winston Churchill.
There's another aspect, of course, as well, which is that the audiences with prime ministers, which we've heard so much about, and there was one, of course, on Tuesday with the new Prime Minister Liz Truss, that traditionally is said to be a forum where the Queen will allow herself to express a view on politically sensitive things, in the full knowledge, of course, that the audience is totally confidential. So one imagines that there are quite a few former prime ministers, and indeed the current one, who will be aware of the Queen's views on some rather touchy subjects.
I think that's certainly the case. But as you rightly point out, those audiences with prime ministers are meant to be strictly confidential. It has occasionally happened that indiscreet prime ministers have let some of their conversations be known, either through their own memoirs or through other channels. But generally speaking, the prime ministers have maintained the silence around those key audiences that they have weekly with the Queen, where she has been known to certainly warn, advise, and encourage prime ministers in different ways.
So here's the tricky question, I suppose, Ed. When the transition happens, whenever it is, and hopefully it won't be yet, we will, of course, be looking at the likely accession of someone who has been very happy to and determined to express views on some things. Now, what will that mean in terms of recalibrating the kind of relationship between a monarch and the British people who've become used to, as you rightly say, this pattern, this very stable pattern that we have now?
Well, I think it's first of all important to note that Prince Charles said on the anniversary of his 70th birthday in a programme, I think, that was made by the BBC, that when he did eventually accede to the throne, he would stop uttering his political opinions. He would stop stating his views publicly, i.e. he would play the role of a good constitutional monarch. I think that is what is expected of him. I think the public expect him to follow the model of his mother. And nevertheless, he has shown himself to be a man of a broad range of opinions. I suppose it remains to be seen whether the new monarch, when that day does come, does continue the example, and I think it is an exemplary model that Elizabeth II has demonstrated, or whether they do things differently. Because, of course, if they do court controversy by uttering their political ideas, then that is the way to create problems, because suddenly they find themselves on the opposite side to public opinion, or a section of public opinion.
Dr. Ed Owens, very good to talk to you, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Dr. Ed Owens there, the author of The Family Firm, Monarchy, Mass Media and the British Public, 1932 to 1953. It's good to talk to him. Here we are, a nice contrast of images here, don't we? On the right-hand side, some of the fly past, which the Queen enjoyed so much during the Platinum Jubilee. That was the opening day of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations after the birthday parade on Horse Guards Parade, which she'd not been able to attend, but there was the balcony appearance which delighted so many people, and the Queen clearly enjoyed it, and they're in the company of quite a few generations of the royal family, and the 70, of course, being marked out by the aircraft in the sky. A really amazing display by the Royal Air Force on that day, and it was a combination of lots of different aircraft, of course, on the day itself, including as a big finale the Red Arrows, who by tradition will really signal the end of the big flypast. There you are, and that was the end of a very big flypast for the Platinum Jubilee, the 70th year of the Queen's reign, and no one questioned really about whether the Queen really kind of enjoyed every second of that, because she obviously did. And then on the left-hand side of the screen we have this rather different image, which is a rather dull, wet day at Balmoral, where the Queen is now in residence, and where the monarch's health is a source of great concern, profound concern, according to the First Minister of Scotland, right now. The Queen's health is causing anxiety to her doctors and to the family. The family that we can see there on the balcony back at the Jubilee, well, quite a few of those on the balcony are either at Balmoral now, including Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, the Princess Royal there, and the Duke of Cambridge, he's on his way. And there we have some of the crowds gathered at Buckingham Palace today. And all eyes really and all thoughts focused on Balmoral, where the Queen's comfort, of course, the Queen's medical care, very much the priority for everyone. And all we can do now is to take note of the report that was issued at lunchtime, which was that the doctors were concerned about her health. It's something they've not said before, so it was something that alerted everyone to the seriousness of the situation. And then to await a further statement from the palace whenever that comes. We have no guidance on that. It would be nice to have a statement from the palace saying that the Queen has improved and that she feels better, but we have no idea when the next statement will come. I'm going to bring in the royal commentator Victoria Howard, who's the editor of the Royal News website, the Crown Chronicles. Victoria, thanks very much for joining us. And what are your reflections as we follow these events today?
I think it's the concern that everyone is showing about the monarch. Of course, as you said, it's very unusual for the palace to comment in this way, that her doctors are concerned about the state of her health. So naturally, that's put everyone on kind of high alert as to what's actually going on. She's been a little bit in decline with her mobility issues in recent months, and it does just send alarm bells ringing, particularly as the family are trying to go and see her, with many people, speculating on what that actually means.
We're just obviously following the reports of who's on their way to Balmoral. I understand at this stage, actually, Victoria, that the Duke of Sussex is on his way there, but he didn't travel with the other group. But that the Duchess of Sussex, apparently, contrary to reports we had earlier, is not travelling to Balmoral. What do you make of that?
I think that's kind of unusual, actually. Of course, we've had a bit of a tumultuous time with the royals and Harry and Meghan in recent years, with their interviews and talking about their situation and experience of the royal family. So that does strike me as a little bit odd when most of the royals that are going in couples. Charles and Camilla, for example, we think Edward and Sophie have travelled together. So slightly strange, but we don't believe the Duchess of Cambridge is there either. So perhaps that's more looking after the children, thinking of the wider family. So just sending kind of the most close members of the family to see her. But maybe it does indicate something to do with the state of the relationship. Of course, we can only speculate about that. But of course, things aren't always quite as rosy as they might seem within the House of Windsor on that front.
As we see crowds gathering at the palace, and as we were saying earlier, it's not the kind of day in central London where lots of crowds are going to come out at this point anyway because of the rain, and looking for, I suppose, messages and wanting to leave messages of support for the Queen. It's a good moment for us to reflect, Victoria, really on the kind of presence and the kind of, I suppose, consistency, the reassurance that the Queen's presence has given so many people over so many decades.
I agree completely, and that's one thing that comes up time again when people kind of look at the monarchy and say, well, what does it do? Are there any benefits to it? That consistency, that reliability is one of those. She's been the head of state for over 70 years, and for her to no longer be there potentially, of course, the day will eventually come. That will be a huge change. So few people can remember a world without the Queen in it as the monarch, as our head of state. And that consistency, always knowing that she is there, is very comforting to people. You only have to look at the pandemic and the message that she gave, the video message, "We will meet again," and how much people respected her for giving that comforting message at that time when the people really needed it, to know that actually that is one of the core benefits of having a monarchy in the UK. So I think people turning out at the palace is definitely just a sign of that. They're showing their good wishes. She's a very well-respected woman, and it's just a sign that people are thinking of her and the wider royal family at this difficult time.
events have moved at such a rapid rate over the past few years, Victoria, haven't they, really? Because we're talking about the Queen, who has her own health problems, clearly, and then on top of that, the challenge of the pandemic and lockdown, and the very poignant image of the Queen sitting alone at St George's Chapel, having lost her husband of 73 years. So the pressures here are not just to do with whatever health problems the Queen is dealing with, but also to do with the stresses and strains of dealing with grief and loss as well.
Absolutely, and I think many people will recognise that in their own families, that it's often very difficult for the person left behind of an older couple, and that can have a detrimental effect on their health. Not only that, the stresses of dealing with public life. You know, the Queen only really takes 2 days off a year, Christmas Day and Easter Sunday, when she doesn't have her government red box of papers. There's always something going on for her, and at 96, that goes well beyond the realm of the ordinary pensioner age to kind of slow down. We have seen that in recent years, Charles stepping up a bit more to take on some of those roles from her, most notably recently at the state opening of Parliament. But it has to be remembered that is such a lifelong pressure as monarch that it must take its toll. And she's enjoyed remarkably good health over the decades otherwise. So she's been very, very fortunate.
Victoria, good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Victoria Howard there, adding to the analysis today. She's editor of the Royal News website, The Crown Chronicles. So our thanks to Victoria. I'd like to go back to Windsor if I can, because that is where my colleague Helena Wilkinson is keeping an eye on things for us. Helena, we're seeing some crowds gathering at Buckingham Palace, and I'm just wondering what the position there is at Windsor.
Well, we've spoken, Hugh, to a number of people in the town centre. For those who aren't aware, the castle is situated right in the centre of Windsor. It's a royal town. A number of people emotional after hearing the news about the Queen's health. Some people have met the Queen, of course, and many locals here who live in this area very much consider the Queen as a local, as one of their neighbours. So there is a great concern about the Queen's health and hearing the news. The castle, of course, attracts a lot of visitors every year. There have been a number of them emerging from the gates after visiting the castle today. Some heard news about the Queen's health while inside, but others were completely unaware when they came out. In terms of when you spoke about the Duke of Cambridge there, who we know is on his way to see his grandmother at Balmoral, we know that the Cambridges recently made the move here to Windsor, where they live now is about a mile away from the castle here. And we saw those images, didn't we, today of the Cambridge children starting their first full day at Lambrook School, which is in Berkshire. So we understand that the Duchess of Cambridge has not travelled with the Duke of Cambridge, and one suspects that is probably because she wants to be there to support her children, their three children after their first day. As we've heard as well, this castle, Windsor Castle, is where the Queen spent much of the last 2.5 years. It is one of her favourite royal residences and probably her favourite working royal residence. It's a place where she feels very comfortable. She loves the castle. It's got a lot of green space around here. And she spent much of lockdown, of course, with her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. They celebrated in November 2020 their 73rd wedding anniversary here. So they were spent a lot of time here together during that period. She has, of course, traditionally spent the summer months in Balmoral, so she was last here at Windsor Castle in July, and normally she would tend to return here to Windsor Castle in October. But in terms of the town centre itself, a great deal of concern after that news of the Queen's health. That statement probably worth repeating for viewers who haven't heard, who are just joining us, that statement from Buckingham Palace, which we got just after 12:30 this afternoon. It says, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The statement goes on to say, The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. But as we've been talking about throughout the afternoon, very rare for the palace to issue statements about the Queen's health. It is very much considered a private matter. So I think given they've released this statement, added to that, the fact that very quickly we've seen members of the Queen's immediate family travel to Balmoral, I think there is a great deal of anxiety and concern about how the Queen is.
Helena, thank you very much. Latest there at Windsor from Helena Wilkinson, and we're looking now at images from Balmoral and now Buckingham Palace, where there are more crowds gathering. We mentioned earlier that our understanding now was that the Duke of Sussex, Harry, is not travelling up to Balmoral with his wife, with Meghan. It's understood that Meghan will be remaining in London. She'll not attend the Well Child Awards, which was the next thing on the diary. But it's said the Duchess could potentially join Harry in Scotland at a later date following this change of plan. Nicholas Witchell is with me. What do we make of that, Nick?
Yes, what do we make of that? Well, I guess that they have concluded that this really isn't a moment for Meghan to be there with the other close members of the family, with the Queen. So she has stayed at Windsor. We know that the Duchess of Cambridge has stayed at Windsor because, of course, the three children are just starting at the new school. So there is every reason why perhaps she would be required to remain at home. Why the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan, has stayed behind? Well, undoubtedly people will speculate about that. But I think that perhaps they just felt that this wasn't a moment for her to be up at Balmoral, really. She might not be terribly warmly welcomed, to be perfectly candid about it. But I'm sure that there will be an opportunity at some point for the family all to come together.
When we look at the latest information that we have, we don't have a lot, Nick, as we know beyond the statement made at lunchtime by the medical team, which is that they're concerned about the Queen's health, which is why you're watching this special coverage from BBC News. We're reporting on the doctor's concern about the Queen's health and the alarm, understandably, that has caused. And the concern is sufficient, indeed, for the Queen's close family to be making its way to Balmoral as we speak, and some of them already there, including the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal. But the Duke of Cambridge, for example, Duke of York, the Earl of Wessex, they are all on their way to Balmoral, having landed at Aberdeen Airport within the past hour or so. So they won't be too long before getting there. The focus on Buckingham Palace in London, clearly understandable, because that is the building associated with the royal family, and that great balcony where the Queen was so happily appearing on the first day of the Jubilee celebrations back in June. Just to sum up where we are right now, Nick, because it's now 10 to 5. That statement was at least 3.5 hours ago. So what would you say to viewers who are just joining the coverage as we speak?
I think the mood, as we've been saying, Hugh, the mood is sombre. The concern is deep. I think the fact, as we've been saying, that Buckingham Palace has expressed the concern being felt by the royal doctors, and the fact that so many members of the close family have broken off from their arrangements today and flown as quickly as possible up to Balmoral en route to Balmoral Castle at the moment. I think that says everything, really. I've been wondering also whether the fact that there does not appear to be any consideration for the sort of medical intervention that would require a hospital visit, that perhaps also is telling. The Queen, we were told in that statement just after midday, is comfortable at Balmoral. Well, we just must wait for any further information, but one does not get the impression that they are considering the kind of treatment, the kind of response that would require her removal to Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. That would be a journey of nearly 50 miles, so that in itself would be quite challenging. So whatever it is that the royal doctors are doing, whatever treatment they are able to apply. That is happening at Balmoral, and we can be sure that they will have made all the arrangements that can be made to ensure that treatment, appropriate treatment, is possible. But again, we are in danger of speculating. Far better that we wait for any hard facts. At the moment, there is no sign of anything from the palace, but it may be, I stress it may be, that they are awaiting the arrival of these other members of the royal family so that they can just be appraised of the latest situation before anything further is said.
OK, well, that's the position as we speak. Thank you, Nick. And let's join Lorna Gordon, our colleague there, at Balmoral. We're looking at the main entrance to the estate there, Lorna, and no sign yet then of the arrivals from Aberdeen Airport.
No, Hugh, no sign of those arrivals. It is a journey of around 40 miles, but the gates to the Balmoral estate, these main gates, at the moment remain closed. There are, of course, other entrances to the estate, but one would expect a motorcade like this to arrive through the main entrance. The road here can be slow at this time of year. It's still heavy with tourists, and it is quite windy. The weather, of course, is also quite poor today here in the north of Scotland, but one would anticipate the royal household to arrive here at around 5 o'clock, perhaps a little after. Of course, this is an area where which the royal family knows well. It is an area that the Queen is extremely fond of. She's been coming to the Balmoral estate since she was a child. She spends almost every summer here. She arrived this year, mid-July, so she's been in residence for a little over 8 weeks. It is an area where she is said to feel most at home, and certainly it's very secure, secluded, and extremely peaceful. The family is known to have barbecues here. She goes for long walks in the hills. She's been known to pass members of the public from time to time, and indeed, you know, people who live in this area are extremely fond of the Queen. When I have spoken to people in the neighbouring towns and villages in the past, they have talked of her as being their neighbour. They're extremely protective of both Her Majesty the Queen and the royal family. Crathie Kirk, she's a member of the congregation, is just a few hundred metres down the road. The minister there, when last I spoke to him, told me some anecdotes of her time here. She regularly attends the local church fete. In fact, one year, one of the congregation spoke to her in the local dialect here, which is known as Doric. And the Queen replied in kind. She knows the local dialects spoken by people here in this Aberdeenshire area. So she loves this area, and people who live in this area, in turn, are very fond of her. We saw her, of course, in those pictures a little earlier this week on Tuesday when she met the outgoing and incoming Prime Ministers. She looked in good form. She was smiling in those photographs. But ordinarily, this is not a place where she performs public and official duties. This is a very private place for the Queen, and a place which she is said to cherish.
OK, Lorna, thank you. Lorna Gordon, our Scotland correspondent there, live outside Balmoral, where the rain is lashing down. You're watching this BBC News special on the significant health concerns of a team of doctors who are taking care of the Queen at Balmoral. We just heard the latest there from an estate that is relatively secluded, certainly, compared to our next location, where Damien Grammaticus is standing by at Buckingham Palace. Damien, the news a little bit earlier on today that the doctors in Scotland were concerned about the Queen's health, coming as Liz Truss was making a rather important statement concerning the future of energy bills. That, of course, insignificant now, given the gravity of the situation we seem to be experiencing with Her Majesty.
Well, certainly overshadowed, Clive, yes, by that announcement from the palace here. I should say that rain clouds have just blown through here too, and you can probably see all the umbrellas that people gathered here. I mean, earlier today, the usual visitors, tourists here, and as that announcement came from the palace, the news sort of spread through crowd here, and there was concern here. Concern too from just down the road in the Palace of Westminster, the House of Commons. The announcement or the news obviously sort of spread through the chamber as that debate about energy policy was happening. New Prime Minister Liz Truss was there, the leader of the opposition was there, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, was there. They were very quickly briefed and have then released statements, all of them, all repeating similar things, all saying, as Liz Truss did, that the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace, and extending thoughts of people across the UK with Her Majesty and her family. Sir Keir Starmer, same thing as well. He said he, along with the rest of the country, is deeply worried by the news from Buckingham Palace. Sir Ed Davey, the whole nation's thoughts and prayers with Her Majesty the Queen, both of them saying everyone was hoping for her recovery. That debate obviously ongoing, or went on into the afternoon, but as you say, attention is very much focused onto the Queen, her health, the royal family, and other prime ministers who served under her then came out and have also been sending their thoughts at this time. So Tony Blair, and he came out, David Cameron came out. What we've heard this afternoon is simply from Downing Street, so across St James's Park here, Downing Street not very far away. The Prime Minister's official spokesman, he has simply said this afternoon that Liz Truss is now working in Downing Street. There will be no more updates said from Downing Street itself about any communications with the palace. Updates will come from the palace, and no plans for the Prime Minister Liz Truss to travel to Scotland today or tomorrow.
OK, Damien, I mean, the Queen has dealt with 15 Prime Ministers through her long reign, the first Sir Winston Churchill, and of course she invited Liz Truss to become Prime Minister just this week. She's not only been a constant in the social life of this country, but also in the political life of this nation as well.
Yes, exactly, absolutely. And right back, as you say, to Winston Churchill, her first Prime Minister through the 70 years that she's been on the throne. 15 Prime Ministers, as you say. I think at that same time, a dozen US presidents have passed through office as well. Those 15 Prime Ministers have been used to that constant presence with the Queen, coming here for weekly audiences at Buckingham Palace. The guidance, the audiences they've had with her have been a feature throughout. And we know that has been, I think, an important, part of those prime ministerial offices, the guidance she could give, the experience that she could bring to bear, and the relationships that she built, and also the relationships that she's built around the world, because she obviously has been a highly travelled monarch, head of state of 14 other countries, crucially important role in places like Canada, Australia. That rain is really coming down now, so you may well hear it on our shelter here. So important, yes, absolutely important role in the political life of this nation, but also of many other nations too, and of course 54 nations of the Commonwealth too. So countries spread across the Caribbean, Africa, and beyond. And in all of them too, I'm sure the situation now, the Queen's health, being watched very closely and with real concern.
Indeed. OK, Damien, thank you. Damien Grammaticus reporting for us live as the heavens open there at Buckingham Palace. Good afternoon. You're watching BBC News. It is just after 5 o'clock, and the the top story, of course, is that the Queen is under medical supervision at Balmoral in Scotland after doctors became concerned for her health. And we've had a statement from Buckingham Palace, which was released earlier this afternoon, which said that the 96-year-old monarch was placed under supervision after further evaluation, but she remains comfortable. The BBC understands that all 4 of her children are either inside the grounds of the Balmoral estate in Aberdeenshire or are travelling there. That's the plane that landed within the last hour or so with members of her family, arriving on an RAF plane there in Scotland to be by her bedside. We know that Prince Charles has travelled to the estate with the Duchess of Cornwall. In the last hour, that's the plane that landed there. And on board was the Duke of Cambridge, Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, and the Earl and Countess of Wessex. Prince Harry is also on his way, we understand, to Balmoral, but is travelling without his wife, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Well, throughout the day, reactions have been pouring in, with the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, saying the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news of the Queen's health. And she said her thoughts and those of everyone in the UK are with the Queen and her family. This was just 2 days ago, of course, when the new Prime Minister was officially asked by the Queen to form a government at Balmoral, Miss Truss becoming the 15th Prime Minister of the Queen's reign. And of course, that event taking place not in London, as would normally be the custom, but in Balmoral, in Scotland, due to the Queen's health. Well, the day started as planned with a statement from the Prime Minister on a package of measures to help people with soaring energy bills. It was the biggest announced in post-war history. But as the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, set out her plans, the debate was interrupted with the news of the Queen's health. And the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, interrupted proceedings to send the best wishes of everyone in Parliament.
I wish to say something about the announcement which has just been made about Her Majesty. I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment. I'm going to take no more, if there is anything else, we will update the House accordingly. Thank you.
Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, speaking a little earlier. We've had some reaction coming in from the White House. The President's thoughts are on the Queen. That is from the United States. These pictures of the members of the royal family who've arrived on that private plane, that RAF plane, in the last hour or so, and those are the vehicles arriving there at the Balmoral estate. We understand with members of the close family of the Queen there to be by her bedside. The rain lashing down at Balmoral there, the Queen having been there for quite a few weeks now. And as I say, she has been having mobility problems, it's been pointed out, and unable to take part in a number of engagements. Our royal correspondent Nick Witchell is here with me.
What a bleak day.
There, yeah.
What a bleak day. Both here in London and at Balmoral, the rain lashing down. Those 3 vehicles which have made the journey from Aberdeen Airport. We saw them there moving in through the main gates of Balmoral Castle. So the family now is really together. Prince Charles and Camilla have been there for some hours because, of course, they live nearby at Birkhall. The Princess Royal also in Scotland at Balmoral at the moment, so she has been there for some hours. But now the rest of the close family, the other children, the Duke of York and the Earl and Countess of Wessex, they were in those vehicles. And the Duke of Cambridge, travelling without his wife, Catherine, who has remained in Windsor to be with their 3 children, who started school today. No sign of the Duke of Sussex so far. He is travelling separately, as we understand it. It's not quite clear how. There was a scheduled flight, I think, arriving in Aberdeen just a few moments ago, but it's not clear whether he was on that or whether he's made his own separate travel arrangements. But so the family is together. There is no sign of any further information from Buckingham Palace, or no suggestion that they will be anything in the next little while, but I would imagine that they will need to say something because the level of interest, the level of concern, we're not just talking about this country. This is a story that is dominating headlines around the world and which is eliciting expressions of concern from political leaders in just about every major country. This is a monarch, a head of state, longest reigned, longest living in our history, but this is somebody who is greatly respected and admired by other heads of state and other politicians in every part of the world.
Indeed, you talk, Nick, about that concern globally. I mentioned a little earlier the White House's press secretary, Joe Biden's press secretary. Apparently he has said his thoughts are with the Queen and her family. Justin Trudeau of Canada has tweeted, "My thoughts and the thoughts of Canadians across the country are with Her Majesty the Queen at this time. We're wishing her well and sending our best to the royal family." That's the tweet from the Canadian Prime Minister there, Justin Trudeau. The family are now gathered at Balmoral, a place that is a little bit more secluded and offering a measure of more privacy, perhaps, than Buckingham Palace. And I suppose it's a place that the Queen has loved and adored for such a long time now, and perhaps the place where her doctors, who are concerned about her health, perhaps where she is most comfortable, one might argue.
Well, it's certainly a place that offers considerable peace and tranquility, as Lorna Gordon was saying just a few moments ago. It is a favourite place, a favourite residence of the Queen. She has known it since her childhood, and I think that she will have really been very determined and keen to get there for her extended summer break. After a period when her health clearly has been questionable, she'd been unable, as we know, to get to some of the significant events in the Jubilee, and I'm quite sure that she was looking forward to an opportunity just to get away up to Scotland. And we mustn't forget her Scottish roots. Her mother was Scottish. Yes. She feels a great affinity with Scotland. We speculated earlier about her undoubted private concern about the state of the Union. That is something that is very close to her heart, but very close privately to her heart, because she, above all, would recognise the constraints of her constitutional position. She would never express a view on that, but I think it was very important to her to feel that the United Kingdom would remain the United Kingdom. But look, this isn't an afternoon to be going in that direction. It is an afternoon to be considering the current state of her health. On that, we are unable to share any further information beyond that which Buckingham Palace put out just before lunchtime. This unprecedented statement from her doctors, notwithstanding that it is now some months since there was a change in direction in her health, excuse me, last October, when she undertook light duties, when she was advised to rest. And we have seen much less of her since last October, throughout this summer, much less of her during the Jubilee and so on. But throughout those many months, the palace, the doctors have never felt it necessary to indicate that her state of health was giving rise to concern. Now, they don't use that word lightly. If they say they are concerned, then it is clear that something of deep concern has happened or has changed. There are rumours, but nobody knows actually what has happened other than the members of the medical household, the members of the royal household who were there, and now the family members who are inside Balmoral Castle and who one assumes are at the Queen's bedside and being brought up to date with what the latest situation is. I think, as I was saying a moment or two ago, the fact that there appears to be no consideration being given to moving her to hospital, that would suggest that there is no further treatment, significant treatment, that is being contemplated. Whatever it is that is being done, we must assume is being done at Balmoral Castle. And we can assume, I think, very safely that the medical household will have ensured that all the sort of medical arrangements that might be necessary will have been made, that contingency plans will have been thought through, so that whatever it is, whether it is the episodic mobility issue, which has clearly been troubling her, which prevented her from travelling down to London for the appointment of the new Prime Minister, or whether there is and has been some underlying condition that they have never actually described or shared with us, as must be the suspicion, I think, but we do not know, because quite rightly the Queen's health is regarded as a matter of which is due patient confidentiality, and which is entitled to patient confidentiality, and which is essentially a private matter. Yeah. So that, is the situation. The other members of the family have arrived. We saw them sweeping into Balmoral just a few moments ago, and we just await whatever further news may emerge. And I stress the word may, because there is no sign at this point of anything further from Buckingham Palace, but that could clearly break just at any moment and change at any moment.
Indeed, it could. Pictures on the left there, the estate at Balmoral in Aberdeenshire, where doctors are concerned for the health of the Queen. Members of her family have arrived on an RAF plane in the last hour and a half, and they travelled the 40 or so miles over to Balmoral from the airport, and they've just arrived in the last 15-20 minutes or so. Some of the comings and goings there at Balmoral, and of course, Nick, over the last couple of engagements, I think it can be said, we've seen the Queen using a walking stick.
Yeah, well, we first saw that actually last September, I think it was, after she early October, after she returned from Balmoral last year, and it was actually at Westminster Abbey, at a service marking the centenary of the Royal British Legion, that we saw her using a walking stick for the first time in public. And she was then in Cardiff for the an event at the Welsh Parliament, and it was just after that, those two engagements, when everything seemed to be all right, albeit that she had a stick. It was then on October the 20th that something changed, because that was the day when they cancelled her visit to Northern Ireland at very short notice and put out a statement to say that she had been advised by her doctors to rest. And she was then brought into the King Edward VII Hospital in London for some tests, for a preliminary investigation. We were never told what that was all about. OK, again, patient confidentiality. You remember the palace tried to bring her into hospital without making a public statement about it. It emerged the following day that she'd been in and kept overnight. And that was the moment at which something changed.
Well, here outside Buckingham Palace, the world's press are gathering, and many tourists and visitors standing outside the gates of Buckingham Palace awaiting news. Let's speak to our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills. And Rhiannon, at the moment, we have simply that statement concerning the Queen's health and the knowledge that so many members of the royal family are gathering at Balmoral.
And yes, interesting, Dermot, there that you should talk about the crowds gathering outside of Buckingham Palace. Of course, at any time of year, you're going to have a crowd there. Tourists always flock there when they come to London. But I think it is a reminder that for many, this news will come as a great concern, not least because it is hugely unusual that the royal family should decide to allow the officials at Buckingham Palace to give us any real details about the Queen's health. So I think the fact that, around 12:30 this lunchtime, that we were told that doctors were so concerned about Her Majesty's health that they recommended that she should stay under medical supervision. Immediately, I think for those of us who follow the royal family closely, it did set alarm bells and it did raise concern. The palace also saying that at the moment she remains comfortable. and she is at Balmoral. There were some suggestions that potentially she'd had a fall, but they were quick to kind of shut down that speculation. But also very quickly, they told us that the family had been told that she was deemed to need this medical supervision, and also that they were heading to Balmoral, which again, of course, only elevates those concerns for the Queen's health. In some ways, though, I think what is quite a shock in terms of hearing this news is the fact that it was only, on Tuesday that we saw the Queen front and centre once again carrying out one of her key constitutional roles. And certainly in the last few weeks, it was being made very clear that the Queen was determined that she would still be the one who would be there to say farewell to Boris Johnson, her 14th Prime Minister, as he tendered his resignation, and then subsequently welcome her 15th Prime Minister, Liz Truss. Of course, it was decided, as has sometimes been the case, that plans and logistics would have to be changed because the Queen, or doctors decided ultimately that the Queen wasn't able to make that journey down to London, that simply it would be foolish for her to do that. And so they wanted to make sure that a plan was in place to make sure that the Queen knew what she was doing and also her outgoing and incoming Prime Minister. But it did mean that we have got those photographs, very recent photographs of the Queen beaming from ear to ear as she met Liz Truss and began what is a very important relationship, of course, for any new Prime Minister. I think also for both the outgoing Prime Minister and the incoming and palace officials, and no doubt the Queen herself, it was important that we saw her that day. We haven't actually seen the Queen carrying out any public official duties since July, when she visited a hospice with Princess Anne. And on that occasion, as we have seen quite frequently over the last 12 months, she did have that walking stick with her, a reminder that there have been those mobility issues certainly increasing over the last 12 months. But in essence, I think the Palace and Number 10 are very conscious that for some people at the moment now feels like an unsettling time for this country. When you think about economic pressures, pressures on families, and also, some might say, political uncertainty. We have literally only just got a new Prime Minister. So to see the Queen there carrying out that constitutional role, even at the age of 96, I think for some across this country, yes, not everyone agrees with a hereditary monarchy, but for some up and down the country, she is still this symbol of stability and continuity. And that's exactly what we again saw her on Tuesday, continuing her duties as we've seen her carry out throughout her 70-year reign.
And Rhiannon, in terms of the senior royals, the members of the family that are either at Balmoral or travelling there, so we understand her 4 children, Charles and Andrew and Edward, are there or on their way there, and their partners, and also Prince William and Harry. But do we know, we understand that Meghan will not be travelling with Harry. What about the Duchess of Cambridge?
Yeah, so we were also told that the Duchess of Cambridge also isn't going to be there. Their 3 children this morning started their new school. You may have seen those pictures of them going for a settling-in afternoon yesterday at Lambrook. So I think the decision was made that she wouldn't be making that journey up. And who knows, but subsequently that may have impacted the decision as to whether or not Meghan decided to fly up there. I think it's hugely significant that the family are gathering there increasingly over the last 12 months. I think very publicly we've seen just how much affection they have for the Queen as a great-grandmother, a grandmother and a mother, and that was abundantly clear throughout the Platinum Jubilee weekend, where for the first time we saw that the Cambridge children really out for any kind of prolonged period of time. There are those wonderful pictures, aren't there, of the Queen on the balcony at Buckingham Palace, talking to Prince Louis, who had his hands over his ears as there was that fly past. The Queen, of course, more than used to seeing many fly pasts during her reign. Many people talk about the fact that she is probably one of the most experienced people when it comes to watching military pageantry. But yes, such a lovely image on the Platinum Jubilee of her reassuring Louis in a way about what was happening. And we've so often seen that. And I think it's been interesting over the last few years to see more softer images of the Queen at times. Certainly around her 96th birthday, a photograph was released of her sitting in front of a window at Windsor Castle. And for her 96th birthday and then for her Platinum Jubilee, I think the messaging was, yes, this is a remarkable head of state that, frankly, most of us can't remember a time when she wasn't Queen. But also, this is a woman who has, throughout her life, been balancing those challenges of carrying out her constitutional duties, getting on with the job in hand, but also making sure that she was there to support her family. And look, there have been difficulties, of course, with the family, certainly in recent years. And, of course, back in the 1990s, it was a very difficult time. But, yeah, today the family will all be coming together there at Balmoral, where, don't forget, they all have really fond memories of spending time with the Queen in Scotland. It's a very important place for all of them, where they get to kick back in the seclusion of the wildness of the Highlands and spend time together away from the prying eyes of the cameras and enjoy that countryside life. We've seen that in so many home videos of the royal family and photographs. So, yeah, I think it's obviously a place that they're very familiar with, and obviously all of them wanting to make what is quite a long journey up to Aberdeenshire to be with the Queen at this moment.
Rhiannon, many thanks. Rhiannon Mills, our royal correspondent there. Well, joining me now is Dr. Anna Hemming, who spent 7 years as a resident in-house doctor at Buckingham Palace, looking after the royal family and the royal household. Very good to talk to you, Dr. Hemming. Well, that statement released by the Queen's medical staff, it says it in the statement, doctors are concerned. She is under medical supervision, but remains comfortable. Just dissect that for us and the decision to release that information.
Well, certainly we didn't release information lightly, and I think we just have to remember that the Queen is a remarkable woman and has been with us for a very long time. So we just have to hope that she's very comfortable and that she is with her family, and they can help her if she can recover. They can help her with that.
Yeah, and that is a calculation, isn't it? Medical confidentiality, privacy, but of course she is Her Majesty the Queen. People want to know. People are worried for her, but the other side of the coin is, of course, you don't want to have an intrusive running commentary.
No, and I think that, for her and for her family and for everybody who goes through this process, there are obviously friends and family that are concerned. And when you're a public profile with such a huge profile, that the nation and most of the world will be concerned. But at the centre of this is somebody who's unwell, and they need the peace and the time and the people around them that they love. So the fact the family is going to be with her now, whatever she's going through, is obviously going to be of much comfort to her.
And she's had a normal slowing down of people as they get into later life over the past few, decades, I suppose.
Well, absolutely. And I think that being 96 and being a full working royal is an incredible job. So, yeah, I'm actually very pleased that somebody has calmed her down a little bit. And, yeah, she's been amazing.
I can't ask you. I know, of course, about specific details of your interactions with her. But, what was it like to work with her, to help her? What is she like to talk to?
So the Queen and all of those that work with her are an incredible team, and it's amazing to have been part of that and to help many people through their service and maintain their health. So for me, working with that team was wonderful. It was an incredible experience and something that, 7 years of that I will never forget. So it was wonderful. I would never release any information. It's just not what we do.
But there are specific challenges there, as you mentioned, about keeping the show on the road. I'm sure sometimes you have to do running repairs for the Royals.
Well, I think like everybody, we have incidences, things happen. None of us are superheroes, unfortunately. So obviously there are things that need to be done in the course of prevention and protection, and making sure that everything that is undertaken by the royal family is safe. So yes, they do have teams in place in order to do that.
When you say making sure that everything is safe, do you mean just from a medical point of view? Because I've just been talking to a Royal Protection Officer. We know the safety side of that. Where does that interact with the medical team?
Well, I think from a medical perspective, obviously all of the trips, the tours, etc., that the royal family do, there will be a medical report that is made. But to be honest with you, when you're looking after such an important person and an important family, all of these things just need to be done.
Yeah, I suppose, yes, when you're talking about royal tours, then you've got inoculations, injections, diets, so many other issues.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Hemming, very good talking to you. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Anna Hemming there, who spent 7 years working alongside the royal household in Buckingham Palace, looking after their health. And in terms of the Queen's health at the moment, this is what we are hearing, a statement released by Buckingham Palace, the official spokespeople at Buckingham Palace here, saying that doctors are concerned about the Queen's health. Therefore, she has been put under medical supervision at Balmoral after that concern was raised. And as Dr. Hemming was telling us there, she is said to be comfortable. So many statements coming into us, statements of support from the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who was only there 2 days ago at Balmoral to meet Her Majesty the Queen, making that journey back there today. The senior members of the royal family, who we understand are gathering, either have gathered or are on their way to Balmoral.
Well, let's just update you with what's been happening at Balmoral within the last half an hour or so. We understand Princes Andrew and Edward, the Queen's sons, have arrived at Balmoral to be with the monarch, as has Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, the Queen's grandson. And, of course, after Prince Charles, heir to the throne. Prince Charles, we understand, arrived at Balmoral earlier on today. He has been in Scotland in recent days, so wasn't too far away when that call came that doctors are concerned about the Queen's health. The royal family was informed and the decision was taken that senior royals needed to go to Balmoral to be with the Queen. We understand that the Duke of Sussex is on his way as well. Prince Harry, we are expecting him to arrive at Aberdeen Airport and, like those before him, make that journey to Balmoral. Well, the Queen's former Scottish Communications Secretary, Louise Tate, joins me now. Louise, the Queen today has been described by historian Sir Anthony Selden, I was speaking to him earlier, as the nation's granny. She has always been there, and the world is watching. People are tuning into us today to find out how the Queen is. We watch and we wait, but it's important to remember that she is actually a granny. She's a mama, as Prince Charles calls her, and the family are gathering in Balmoral today. Perhaps you can give us an insight as to what it will be like inside Balmoral. It's a vast estate, it's a big structure, but the royal family and the Queen in particular occupies a smaller compartment, so it will be a very small family gathering in that sense.
Well, as I think I've said before, Balmoral, it is a castle, but it's, in terms of a castle, it's still quite an intimate space. And I think that because they've spent so much time there as a family together, this will be, it's just like it is a home. It is a home, and they will feel that they are coming to that home, something that's familiar to them, and they know that that's where Her Majesty is very, very happy and always has been. So that I think that they will feel that they are around her in one of her favourite places at this time.
We're just showing viewers an image that was taken not so long ago, about half an hour or so ago, of Prince William driving his uncle Prince Andrew and Prince Edward into Balmoral. They arrived at Aberdeen Airport a little earlier and drove to Balmoral through those gates, and we assume are now with the Queen. We understand that Prince Harry is on his way. Let's go back to how this all began earlier on this afternoon, around 12:30 lunchtime. That statement was released by Buckingham Palace. And Louise, as a communications secretary, what will have gone into that? Because it came as a shock to so many people, because we saw the Queen publicly only on Tuesday inviting the new Prime Minister Liz Truss to form a government. We understand she carried out another engagement later in the day to award a member of her staff with an honour. That was a private matter. You know, we haven't got any pictures of that, but she was very much active until recently. So talk to me about what will have been going on in terms of putting that statement out there and the wording of it. So much thought and care will have gone into it.
Indeed, but I think that given that there was the Privy Council meeting was cancelled, that Her Majesty would not take part in that, and then if the message was to the family to come and join Her Majesty at Balmoral, it would have been very difficult for so many members of the family to make that journey without it being noticed. So I think that it was the right thing to do. It clarified the situation. Inevitably, it'll be seen as a significant move and things will be read into that. But it is a very carefully worded statement, and that's rightly so. And I think that they just tried to avoid speculation as much as they could by giving some clarity, really.
Louise, given that, and given that we know very clearly the Buckingham Palace do not provide a running commentary on anything, least of all the Queen's health, this statement is being seen as significant. When can we expect to hear something else? What kind of update will come? Will there come? Will any updates come? Because I'm just looking at this screen and I'm mindful of the fact that hundreds of thousands, millions of people across the world are going to be watching those gates. Will the palace be mindful of that, or will it be business as usual in terms of communications?
I think that really it will be business as usual. They are not going to give out running commentary. They're not going to follow the news cycle, unfortunately. This will be dictated by events as they happen or don't happen. So we will just have to wait, unfortunately.
OK, Louise, you're watching and waiting with us, and as somebody who knows the Queen, I can only begin to understand how difficult that is. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us here on Sky News. I'm sure we will speak in the coming hours and days. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, now watching and waiting here at Buckingham Palace as we keep our eyes on the gates of Balmoral Castle. I want to talk now to a professor of British politics and the Constitution at University College London and co-editor of The Role of Monarchy in Modern Democracy, Professor Robert Hazel. Very good to talk to you, Professor Hazel. Now, it's a difficult time for any nation when its head of state is under medical supervision because their doctors are concerned about their health.
Indeed, but this is a contingency which will have long been prepared for, and so people in government as well as in the palace will be rolling out those contingency plans. And there are two things that might happen. The Queen might become seriously ill, and if she becomes so ill that she is incapable, through infirmity of body or mind, of performing the royal functions, and I'm quoting now from the Regency Act, then a regent would be appointed to carry out the functions of being the sovereign in her place, and that would be Prince Charles. So that's one kind of contingency plan, which people will have near the top of their minds. The other is, if sadly the Queen is very seriously ill and were to die, then there are very well-rehearsed plans for a very grand royal funeral known as Operation London Bridge, and all that has been planned for years in advance. And it will be the biggest state funeral any of us have seen for a very long time, and possibly in the whole of our lifetimes.
So as you describe it, and as we understand it, there is never a moment, even a moment, when the United Kingdom is without a head of state, either a king or queen or a regent.
That's right. So the moment the Queen dies, Prince Charles becomes king, although formally that would be declared the next day at a special meeting of the Privy Council known as an Accession Council. A regency is slightly different in that it has to be formally declared by 3 out of 4 very senior officials, and those are the Lord Chancellor, the Lord Chief Justice, the Speaker of the House of Commons, and the Lord Chancellor. So they will all have been briefed about their role, and if a regency is declared, it can only be done on the basis of evidence, including medical evidence, which will be submitted to them. And if that happens, the declaration is made at a meeting of the Privy Council, and we will all learn then if a regency has been created, and the regent would then be Prince Charles. And he would be regent acting in the name of the Queen, not only of the United Kingdom, but of all the other 14 countries around the world, where the Queen is also head of state. Let us not forget, she's Queen of Australia, Queen of Canada, Queen of New Zealand, Queen of Jamaica, Queen of other places in the Caribbean and in the Pacific.
And Professor Hazel, just give me your assessment of how Her Majesty negotiates this. I mean, it's a rather extraordinary, is it a unique role in terms of the British Constitution and how it has just evolved and the separation of powers?
Well, as everyone acknowledges, she has been an extraordinarily conscientious monarch. She has devoted the whole of her life to public service, worked incredibly hard. The Queen receives state boxes every day of the year, with only 2 exceptions, Christmas Day and Easter Day. Not many people work as hard as she does right through into their 90s. And so she will be remembered not only for her extraordinarily long reign, but also for the extraordinary devotion that she has shown throughout that reign to her public duty. I think I needn't say any more than that. This is very well known. She has been a remarkably conscientious, as well as a remarkably long-serving monarch.
Professor Hazel, Robert Hazel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, let's bring in our Scotland correspondent, James Matthews, who is at Balmoral. And James, within the last hour, senior members of the royal family have arrived, have gone through those gates to be with the Queen. Talk us through what's been happening.
Yeah, about 20 minutes ago we saw a convoy driven from Aberdeen Airport, driven in the lead vehicle by Prince William. He was in the driver's seat. Next to him was his uncle, the Duke of York, and in the back were Edward and Sophie. So the family gathering is increasing in size. Among those still to arrive, of course, is Harry, who we expect at some point over the coming hours. Prince Charles, he was there from early in the morning. He had actually been due to take part in a royal visit in central Scotland, but that was cancelled, and that was the first inkling that we had that things weren't quite right today. I can tell you the weather is pretty brutal here at the moment, raining extremely heavily. As you can see, it was raining very heavily on Tuesday when we last saw the Queen in the drawing room of Balmoral when she met and appointed the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. She made that Aberdeen Airport to Balmoral journey, and by all accounts, the Queen was in good form. She remarked on the weather, saying to her press secretary and photographer in the drawing room at the time how dark it was in the skies overhead. She's well used to it, of course, and quite enjoys, actually, this part of the world, notwithstanding the weather. She has been coming here for many years. This is a time of year when she and the family enjoy summer holidays together, and it is a place of
family gatherings on a day when we are seeing the family come together. That is a well-practiced routine, albeit in happier circumstances through time. They have barbecues, they have sleepovers. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren are invited to a large family gathering on the Balmoral estate. Harry, who we expect to arrive later today, he and Meghan actually had been invited to come and spend time at Balmoral for that sleepover, the Queen's sleepover, but they were also invited by Prince Charles, Harry's father. That wasn't an invitation that was taken up, but clearly circumstances have dictated otherwise, and Harry will be part of that family group around the Queen at this most difficult time.
James, I think the weather, just about summing it up. James Matthews at Balmoral for us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Now, well, let's talk now to the editor of the Crown Chronicles, Victoria Howard. Thank you for joining us, Victoria. And first of all, your reaction to this statement from Buckingham Palace about the Queen's health, about the fact she's under medical supervision, and doctors are concerned about her health.
It's highly unusual for them to comment in such a straightforward way. We often get from the palace these kind of allusions to something not being right, undergoing examinations or tests. So for them to say she is ill is quite significant, and for them to make a statement about it, that the family are also visiting, hugely, hugely significant. And I think that we can therefore draw the conclusions that this is a very serious situation with regards to the health of the monarch.
And in terms of what they let us know because we're not trying to intrude, but because we are all concerned, they are being very careful about what they've said subsequently, Buckingham Palace.
Absolutely. Of course, they're saying this because it's important that we know she is our monarch, she's our head of state, she's a core component of the constitutional monarchy and the way the government works. So it is important that people are made aware of these things. However, they kind of don't want to give too much away. We only have to think, of course, it was so long ago, but when George VI passed in 1952, the cards were played very close to the chest. The announcement wasn't made for a while, of course, to let the family kind of deal with that initial shock of the event itself. But I do think it's important that we know. We don't necessarily need all those details, that the public will just run with those. And of course, they want to keep us assured she is under great medical care. She's got some of the best medical teams around the world. But to give us any further details would probably be inappropriate, as she is a public figure, but of course she has a private life too.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? This is for the family first and foremost. But, I mean, she's not just a national figure, she's an international figure, one of the best known people in the entire world.
Exactly. So there's public interest naturally, and that's why we see many things that with the way the royal family works. For example, the first day of school for Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, we get a little insight into that day. We get a photo release of the event itself, but then they are allowed to go on as normal people as possible, of course, with that kind of royal status hanging over them. It's just important that they do keep us in the loop, though, because not only is she, part of the system, the functioning system of government, people really respect her. She's been our monarch for 70 years. And for them to be kept in the loop after a platinum jubilee that went off so well, she clearly really enjoyed that. Thousands of people came to London to join in those celebrations with her. I think they're just very conscious of the fact of the goodwill that people have for the Queen. So just want to kind of steer it. And I think this is part of that process that's been happening for a while now, with us seeing Prince Charles as this next king. This is, of course, what we all think about when we hear these kind of worrying statements about her health. And it's just the natural progress of life, of course. But many people have kind of been worried about Charles as the next king. So this is them setting that up. And he has been stepping up in terms of duties for a number of months, if not years.
Indeed, a number of years. And we saw that, I suppose, particularly at the state opening of Parliament. And this is being carefully managed, the idea that there is a team, an experienced team.
Exactly. And of course, this sort of plan has been in place for a very long time to deal with the eventual time that the Queen passes. We all know it's been trending on Twitter today. London Bridge is the code name for that plan. And it's just the process, which is militarily precisely organised, that everyone knows exactly what happens and what the processes and next steps are to move with that succession, to keep things going for the British monarchy. So, of course, many people at the palace and within the royal teams are actually former military personnel or are on secondment to the palace from the armed forces. So you can just imagine how strictly controlled and precise all of these plans are.
And Victoria, just tell us a bit about Balmoral itself. We saw Her Majesty receiving Boris Johnson as Prime Minister and then asking Liz Truss to become Prime Minister just 2 days ago. She wasn't able to travel to London for that changeover because of the mobility issues we all knew she had. But Balmoral is the place that is perhaps closest to her heart, and indeed the royal family's heart, and has been for many, many years and generations.
Exactly. So Balmoral was actually built by Prince Albert and Queen Victoria in the mid 1800s, sorry, and it became this gathering place for them during the summer holidays. So for them to continue that tradition, the monarchy loves tradition. The royals do like that kind of reassuring nature of things. So every generation since has returned to Balmoral for this kind of summer gathering and holiday. It's often cited, of course, being located in the middle of the Scottish Highlands as a real place where they can actually relax. There are no cameras around because it's all private land, that they can enjoy their outdoor pursuits without, worrying people seeing them, for example. And they are very much an outdoorsy family, so enjoying walks and hikes, fishing, etc. And it's really just a place they really enjoy that relaxation time that they just simply can't get in London, partly because of all the duties, but partly because of the nature of the city and the people that are always around them. So that photo of the Queen meeting Liz Truss, she was in her tartan skirt and a cardigan, much more relaxed, much more informal than kind of her usual day wear that we might see. And I think that's just really reflective of the place it holds in their heart. It does feel like a home, because it isn't more of an office as Buckingham Palace or Windsor, for example.
Good to talk to you, Victoria. Thank you very much indeed. Victoria Howard there from the Crown Chronicles.
Well, joining me now is the historian and author Sir Anthony Selden. Sir Anthony, it's important to remember that so many people watching today around the world, the Queen is not just the sovereign of the UK, but also of 14 Commonwealth realms in addition as well. This really does have the eyes of the world on it today.
Isn't it incredible? There's no leader in the world who has been there almost continuously since the end of the Second World War. The most photographed, the most famous face in the world. A lot of Britain's place in the world is dependent upon her. A lot of people come to London, including presidents of the United States, to visit her. They're keener on visiting her in Buckingham Palace or Windsor than prime ministers who, for all their strengths, they come and they go. 15 in the life of Her Majesty, and let's hope there'll be more, although Liz Truss would probably hope not too soon, not too many more. So an extraordinary figure. Also just reflecting there that one thing that she does have is that at least she can be assured about the continuity of her family. One of the most enduring anxieties for her predecessors as the monarch of England all the way back to the Norman Conquest in 1066 has been, will there be somebody to succeed? It worried her predecessor Elizabeth I greatly, who died without child, and Victoria did have the Prince of Wales, who became Edward VII, but she was very worried about him and whether he really would step up to the mark, and whether he was a little bit too interested in the big things, in the luxuries of life, to take the job seriously. In the end, actually, he did quite well.
Can we talk about the Queen's years of service, 70 years, recently celebrating her Platinum Jubilee? The Queen is a hard-working royal. We're just looking at pictures of her out and about. These are the public engagements that we see. There is so much that we don't see.
Absolutely, and she is, let us remember, the head of state. So the Prime Minister comes to the head of state to be invited to form a government. The Queen isn't invited by anybody at all. She is the sovereign. She is the ultimate authority, although that sovereignty is shared, obviously, with Parliament. But she is the linchpin of the Constitution. She sees all the papers, as we were hearing. She knows deeply, has a wisdom, has an institutional memory, has an understanding of all the issues, all the personalities in this country and abroad, possessed by nobody else. So prime ministers do find it a privilege to listen to her. And if they are wise, and many of them have been, they do listen to her and they do follow that advice. Of course, we'll never, ever know what that advice is because it is a great hidden part of the Constitution that we'll never know what the monarch and the says as head of state to the head of government. But extraordinarily hard-working, and she's kept going. And you know, isn't that remarkable? 70 years still to be working, 36 years beyond the age of 60, when many people have retired. The way she kept going after the death of her beloved husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, that's a contrast, isn't it, with Queen Victoria, who went into hiding after her husband, Prince Albert, died and made the monarchy very unpopular, but the Queen was straight back at us, and she was doing her work in private and in public to keep going, indefatigable, extraordinarily heroic. So the most famous person in the world, and justifiably so.
Sir Anthony, you touched on it earlier. The Queen is all most of us, the majority of us, have ever known, this second Elizabethan age we have lived in. Can you put into historical context Queen Elizabeth II? How important and historical figure in the decades to come is this monarch going to be?
Well, enormous because of longevity, the longest serving monarch. Female monarchs are long-lasting. Elizabeth I, 1588 to 1603, and Queen Victoria, 1837 to 1901, 64 years, outdone by the Queen. Of course, we must remember that the earlier monarchs, before the extension of the voting in the 19th century, it was the head of state, the monarch, who had the real ultimate power, and power has passed in the last 100 years progressively to the politicians, to the Prime Minister. So you can't really compare her to, say, Elizabeth I or Henry VIII or Edward III, because they had such different jobs that they were doing. They really were the people who ran the country and terrorised the country. And yet we can contrast her with the politicians who she served with other monarchs abroad. And she has defined the era. In 100 years' time, people will write about the Elizabethan era. And maybe this is the moment that we stop talking about the post-war period and we see the period as ending with the death, when it comes, of Queen Elizabeth II. So I think an importance politically, but also psychologically for all of us, the fact that she is so important. She is the nation's grandmother, and I think her death will remind us, when it comes, of our own losses and sadnesses, because that's the kind of figure she is, including children. the Paddington Bear at the Platinum Jubilee. Just an extraordinary showing, as was the James Bond during the Olympics. I mean, who would think that this lady in her 80s and 90s could keep with it, could keep relevant even to children?
She has resonance with so many people, and that's reflected in so many of the messages we're getting here this evening at Sky News from people watching as we watch and wait for an update on the Queen's health from Balmoral. So, Anthony Selden, thank you.
Well, let's go live now to Downing Street. Our political correspondent, Joe Pike, is there. And, Joe, this is quite an extraordinary day. The news of the deterioration in the Queen's health coming on a day that, politically, could define Liz Truss's premiership.
Exactly, Dermot. Today was perhaps the most significant announcement of Liz Truss's premiership, the most expensive one perhaps, £150 billion. Some estimate this big energy bills package will cost. And it was during a debate on that topic in the House of Commons that Nadeem Zahawi, a Cabinet Office Minister, passed a note to Liz Truss, spoke to the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, and also Keir Starmer, the opposition leader, was spoken to. Clearly, from the body language and the faces of these senior politicians, something concerning had happened. And indeed, Liz Truss, Keir Starmer and other party leaders have tweeted messages of concern. Certainly there has been a sense in Westminster, in Whitehall, here at number 10, for the past year, I think, that although the Queen's central constitutional role as head of state has not changed, will not change, the way she has undertaken it certainly has. We saw that at the state opening of Parliament, the Queen's speech, as some call it, where that speech was delivered not by the Queen but by her son, the Prince of Wales, with the Duke of Cambridge sitting alongside him. We also, of course, saw a change this week with that handover of power, Boris Johnson resigning and Liz Truss being asked to form an administration. Normally, of course, Dermot, those politicians would, well, the outgoing Prime Minister would travel from here, from 10 Downing Street, a mile away to where you are in Buckingham Palace, and said it was a 500-mile journey to Balmoral, that private, secluded castle that has been a home of monarchs right back to the time of Queen Victoria in the 1850s. Also, I think, significant that last night a Privy Council meeting was due to be taking place, the Privy Council being this group of senior government advisers. Now, the Queen would have presided over that meeting using video conferencing software from Balmoral. It would not have been a face-to-face meeting, and yet, at the last moment, a couple of hours, I think, before it was due to take place, it was not cancelled but postponed, and we were told by Buckingham Palace that the Queen's doctors were advising her to rest. That would have been the moment where Liz Truss would have taken the oath to become First Lord of the Treasury, a title she holds alongside Prime Minister. First Lord of the Treasury are the only words on the letterbox of number 10 Downing Street on that front door. So these events happening in a different way were signs, clearly, of a shift. And I think it's also worth reflecting on a role the Queen has provided, not in public but in private, to Prime Ministers, and a role she has continued to provide with wisdom and counsel, that wisdom being particularly valuable partly because of her longevity and the continuity that she has provided as well. Many of the Prime Ministers that she has counselled, supported, worked alongside, often through crises, through times of change, many of them are now figures in history books, figures whose decisions are debated on by historians, by school students, by university students, people like Winston Churchill, but of course Eden, Macmillan, more recently Edward Heath, Margaret Thatcher. The Queen has, through 15 Prime Ministers, provided that continuity, and her advice, I think, is so valued because of her longevity. There has been a change. She is in her 10th decade. She has occupied that role now for 7 decades. If you speak to people in Westminster who have met her, who've known her, albeit briefly, there is this strange mix that she is a familiar face for them and for many of us, and yet still she remains, I think, Dermot, a pretty enigmatic figure.
Joe Pike, many thanks.
Well, joining me now, Dean of Miami Herbert Business School at the University of Miami, John Quelch, who was awarded his CBE by the Queen back in 2011. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon here on Sky News. First of all, how is the news of the Queen's health being received in Miami today?
The Queen is an extraordinarily admired figure in the United States as well as worldwide, and perhaps next to the Pope is perhaps the most recognized apolitical international figure on the world stage. She is extraordinarily admired in Boston, where I was present in 1976 when she visited for the U.S. Centennial, and in all parts of the United States. I think there's a deep affection and admiration for this consummate, quiet leader.
Can you talk to me about your experience with the Queen, your meeting of the Queen back in 2011 when you were awarded the CBE? Talk to us about the day and what she said to you.
Well, it was a magnificent day, and as all of those who are privileged to receive an award from the British monarchy know, you approach Buckingham Palace with the hope that the royal standard will be flying over Buckingham Palace, because that means the Queen is in residence and she is going to preside over the ceremony at which you will receive your award. I think the most important impression and reflection I can give you from this occasion, and I have met the Queen on a couple of other occasions as well, but on this occasion, the curiosity, the attentiveness to responses that I gave, and the feeling that even though she said only a few words to me, that I had had a personal and intimate conversation with her. And this, I think, was one of her great strengths that perhaps is not commented on that often. In order to lead effectively for 70 years, you have to be very conserving of your energy. And I think she developed a capability to lead while saying little, but projecting a tremendous amount of capability and attentiveness, as I've said, to every person who came into contact with her.
A special occasion to meet the Queen, and many would say a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but you have been privileged enough to meet the Queen on a number of occasions, as you say. Perhaps we could just talk a little bit more about how the Queen is seen in America. You touched on it earlier. Given that the Queen has no official connection with the United States, she's obviously Queen of Commonwealth nations as well as the UK, but considering there isn't that link with the United States, why is there such a special affection for Queen Elizabeth II there?
I think because she's such a unique figure. There is no individual in the United States that I can think of who's held a leadership role for 70 years in a corporation or in any organization, let alone the political arena. So she is a unique and exceptional person in this regard, and that, of course, is part of her fascination. But at the same time, I believe she's admired because she doesn't project drama. She projects continuity and solidity and integrity, and these are all qualities that in many leaders today on the world stage we don't find sufficient abundance of. So there are qualities to her leadership style and her approach to managing family affairs, if I can go down to that personal level, that I think all Americans and citizens around the world can learn from and take lessons from.
John Quelch, lovely words there about the Queen. John Quelch, who was awarded CBE by the Queen back in 2011. Thank you very much for joining us here on Sky News this evening.
Good evening. This is Sky News live from Buckingham Palace. Senior royals have gathered at Balmoral after confirmation that the Queen is under medical supervision because the doctors have become concerned about her health. All of the Queen's children are thought to now be at her side in Balmoral. Prince Charles was seen leaving Dumfries House in Ayrshire to travel to Aberdeenshire. And a bit later on, a plane landed at Aberdeen Airport carrying members of the royal family. That included Prince William and Prince Andrew. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended that she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. The Prime Minister then tweeted that the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. She continued, "My thoughts and the thoughts of people across our United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time." The Archbishop of Canterbury tweeted, "My prayers and the prayers of the people across the Church of England and the nation are with Her Majesty the Queen today." It continues, "May God's presence strengthen and comfort Her Majesty, her family, and those who are caring for her at Balmoral." Let's bring in our royal correspondent now, Rhiannon Mills. And Rhiannon, do we understand now that all the senior members of the royal family are now at Balmoral?
So it seems that the only person who may well be missing at the moment from Balmoral is Prince Harry, who purely by luck is in this country this week carrying out a series of engagements. So we are still waiting to find out when he is going to arrive. But yes, we saw other members of the royal family arriving in the last couple of hours after having to fly all the way up from here, all the way up to Aberdeenshire. We know that Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall were already in the area. They were already staying at Birk Hall and also due to carry out some engagements in Scotland, both today and tomorrow. So they got there very quickly. Also, Princess Anne, she was also in the area because she'd carried out engagements. But then this afternoon we saw the cars carrying Prince William, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, so Prince Edward and Sophie, and also Prince Andrew, because we heard actually quite early on today that members of the royal family had been informed that doctors had decided that the Queen should remain under medical supervision because they were concerned about her health. And the palace, I think, surprising that they should give us that information in itself, but also further surprise the fact that they decided to announce that members of the family would be gathering up in Balmoral. Of course, the palace, not an institution that likes to cause unnecessary worry, concern or attention. But of course, the fact that we have this statement saying that the doctors have been concerned about her and now her family are gathering is inevitably going to cause worry and also, I think, a degree of shock for many of us. You were just seeing pictures there of Tuesday where the Queen very clearly had told her advisors that she wanted to be the one who, again, carried out the appointment of yet another Prime Minister. Yes, arrangements had to be changed to allow that to happen, but she was still very much front and centre carrying out those constitutional duties. The pictures that we're seeing at the moment actually a year ago, and it does show you just how much things have changed for the Queen. Over the last 12 months, we have seen her carrying out fewer duties, fewer responsibilities, and we have regularly been told by the palace that she was having those episodic mobility issues. But also, I think the palace and the mechanisms that the team around her wanting to make sure that at all times they could adjust the plans and make sure they could facilitate things as much as possible to allow her to continue to carry out her duties. Undoubtedly, this is going to come as as a worry to many across the country. But I think for the Queen, certainly her carrying out her duties on Tuesday was once again a sign that that pledge she made when she was just 21 and reinforced this year to mark her Platinum Jubilee, she was and continues to be determined to carry out her duties. And her family, of course, now there to support her in Balmoral.
And of course, Rhiannon, Her Majesty's been at Balmoral all summer, as she has been every summer.
That's right. It's a place that she loves, and you can see why when you travel up to that very secluded part of the Highlands. I went for a look around Balmoral earlier in the summer, and there's a wildness to it. And for a family who we know they love their country pursuits, we know that the Queen is never happier than when she's surrounded by her dogs and also her horses as well. And over the years, many people have talked about how they may well catch a glimpse of the Queen out on her ponies as she's been spending time in Balmoral. But it's also a really important family time for her. And actually in the past, I've spoken to the likes of Prince Edward and Prince William about those family times, because you can't forget, for the Queen, 70 years of remarkable public service. 365 days of the year, always looking at those red boxes full of state papers, but also trying to balance family life. And Balmoral is a place where I think to a degree she felt she could do that. And for all of those family members who we can see there in that car, I think now they will be at Balmoral, where, of course, they've had so many wonderful memories that they have shared with the Queen, but also no doubt catching up with the doctors, trying to get the updates of exactly how she's doing, how she's feeling as we await updates from Buckingham Palace.
And just on the doctors, presumably she has had constant medical attention over the past few years.
Well, I think what's been so interesting about the Queen, and why probably the last 12 months have been a surprise to many, as we've seen her, in a way, handing over some of those responsibilities, is throughout her life she has really enjoyed relatively good health. And we've had the odd cataract operation, or she's had the odd issue potentially with walking. About 6 years ago she was seen with a walking stick, but that soon went. And I was always struck by the fact that well into her 90s she's continued to carry out things that many people in their 80s wouldn't be able to do. For example, walking that long length of Westminster Abbey, or walking up those steep steps at St Paul's, completely unaided, completely unassisted. And so for some people, it has been a shock that she has had to hand over some of those responsibilities, has had to at times say, well, I can't do that. I just can't do that today. But she is 96 years old. But I think what we saw on Tuesday was that resolve to do what she can. And her family, increasingly, over the last 12 months, have been there standing by. Of course, we saw it on the Platinum Jubilee weekend. They were all there around her. On the Thursday, she was there on the balcony. She was lighting the first beacon. But then it did take it out of her. She had to relax for a couple of days, rest up for a couple of days. And that was where the family stepped in. But also, I think what's been striking over the last 12 months is the Queen has been showing us that she has got great faith in the future, surrounded by the likes of Prince William and Kate, Prince Charles and Camilla, saying, look, I have real faith in the future, and you should too.
Rhiannon, thank you very much.
Well, crowds have been gathering at Buckingham Palace this evening. News broke at around 12:30 this afternoon. That statement coming from Buckingham Palace about the Queen's health, saying that her doctors were concerned for Her Majesty's health and recommended that she remain under medical supervision, adding that the Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. The Queen may not be at Buckingham Palace, but it is very much a focus for those well-wishers who want to head there and send their best wishes to the Queen. We've had no update officially since that statement. We were informed, though, that the Queen's close family were told, and they have since been making their way to Balmoral. Within the last hour or so, we've seen Princes William, Edward and Andrew arrive. Prince William driving Prince Edward and his wife Sophie Wessex and Prince Andrew from Aberdeen Airport to Balmoral to see the Queen. Prince Charles was in Ayrshire, we understand. He took a helicopter to Aberdeenshire, to the Balmoral estate earlier on in the day before that statement came out. And as we understand it, we are now waiting for the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, to arrive at Balmoral. We understand he is making his way there. He is yet to arrive. Well, let's head to Balmoral and our Scotland correspondent, James Matthews. James, despite the weather, which pretty much sums up the mood this afternoon, crowds are gathering at Buckingham Palace. What's happening there at the Balmoral estate?
Well, crowds-wise, not a lot, actually. Yes, it's the tourist season, but on this filthy day in terms of the weather, there's something like a couple of dozen tourists around, many media here, of course, to see comings and goings at the gates of the Balmoral estate. And we saw the arrival within the past hour of a 4-vehicle convoy. Leading that convoy was Prince William at the wheel of a vehicle that had the Duke of York, his uncle, in the passenger seat, and in the rear seats were Edward and Sophie. I think it's fair to say all were grim-faced as they entered the gates to widen the family gathering around the Queen. Prince Charles, as you said, Sarah Jane, was already inside. He has been inside Balmoral for some hours today. He was due at a royal event in the Central Belt, and that's the first inkling that anybody had that things were not as they should be today when that particular event had to be cancelled. He has substituted, of course, for his mother over recent weeks. Last Saturday it was the Braemar gathering. She would normally attend that. It's one of the events here that is a big draw for the royal family. The Queen particularly enjoys the children's sack race. It's an event that she would typically attend, but not this year. Prince Charles attended the Braemar Highland Games. He also spent some time with his mother on Saturday, several hours, I'm told, and he has been here for a few weeks, as has she. I mean, she's here for a couple of months every year at this time of year. It is the base of her summer holiday, and those around her make the point that in terms of where she will continuously sleep in the one place, this is it, Balmoral. She spends 3 months in the one place, in the one bed, and it's a place, of course, that she's very fond of. She has changed her routine in accordance with her declining health. Normally she would attend Crathie Kirk every Sunday. COVID, of course, changed that in the initial months, but ever since COVID, she's not attended church. Charles has gone to the nearby Crathie Kirk, but for the Queen, the minister has crossed and worship has taken place within Balmoral Castle itself. In the months of COVID, it took place inside one of the large rooms inside that property, with some distance between the Queen and the visiting minister. She has looked relatively well. People who have seen her in recent weeks lunching with her lady-in-waiting at Inchnabobbert Cottage at Glenmick, picnicking at her mother's old fishing hut by the River Dee. They say that when they've seen her out and about, she's looked fine and relatively healthy, healthier, I'm told, than she did in the past couple of months over the course of the Platinum Jubilee and so on. She's been walking the corgis, walking with a stick and without. And of course we saw her on Tuesday, the last time we saw her publicly, when she appointed Liz Truss as Prime Minister. The people who were in that room before the Prime Minister arrived, the press secretary and press photographer, they speak about her joking about the dark skies over Balmoral, dark skies that she has become well used to in a place where she has that she has enjoyed, despite the regular inclement weather. But it's a dark day here, weather-wise. There is concern, clearly, not just among the royal physicians, but the family as well. I was here 25 years ago, almost to the day, Sarah Jane, when there was another very dark day when Princess Diana died. I remember Prince William, Prince Harry, as young children, walking up this particular road, taking a look at floral tributes. They will be reunited behind the gates of the Balmoral estate in the next few hours, assuming that's when Prince Harry arrives here, probably via Aberdeen Airport. So a family gathering. They're used to family gatherings here in good times and in bad.
Yeah, that's a sobering reminder, James, of what we are watching unfold. As James Matthews has been saying, the majority of senior royals are behind those gates at Balmoral with the Queen. We are just waiting for Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, who we understand is making his way at Balmoral to be with his family. The world is watching and waiting for an update on the Queen's health, but important to remember at this time that it is a family that is dealing with the ill health of a mother and a grandmother, 96 years of age.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Well, here at Buckingham Palace, yes, indeed, we're watching and waiting. The world is watching and waiting because although Her Majesty the Queen and the members of the royal family are at Balmoral, it's here where you get the information from 6 hours or so ago when that statement was released about the concerns about the Queen's health, the medical supervision that she is now under. Well, as we wait, I'm joined now by Dick Griffin, one of the Queen's former Royal Protection officers. Good to talk to you, Dick.
Hi, Dermot.
You spent many, many years here. Just how long in total did you work in Royal Protection with the royal family
Oh,
for?
gosh, I was there like man and boy, 32 years.
Was that all in the Queen's service? Or
no, I came in initially on the uniform side after the Michael Fagan break-in. And after a year, I was transferred to, as he was, Prince Edward, to take to Cambridge University for 3 years. And then I was promoted and spent 13 and a half years looking after the Duke of Edinburgh. And then 1999 I was promoted and moved to Her Majesty the Queen for 14 years until I retired in 2013.
My goodness me.
So 30 years with them.
And you must have been reluctant to retire. Just tell me your thoughts at this time after that statement. It was a real jolt for everyone.
Oh, I mean, it was devastation. I mean, I was lucky enough to be so close to them. And I was probably as close to them as some of my own family. So to hear such sad news, you know, while we pray to God it'll turn out good news, you know, it's not looking good, so I'm prepared for the worst.
Indeed. Tell us about Her Majesty. I mean, you were in a privileged, a lucky position, as you say. What a wonderful job to have. Talk to me about the relationship you built up with her.
Well, you're lucky enough to, the protection officers who work there, like all the personal staff, you do build up a very special relationship with her. And after all, but you're always conscious of the fact that she's the Queen and you work for her, so you never step over the line. But she's so considerate. She wants to know all about your family, everything you do in your off-duty time, anything you've got. And we talk about, sometimes you're in the car for hours and hours, and occasionally at Balmoral you go out on a picnic with her, and sometimes just the two of you. And you just talk about everything under the sun, and it was just wonderful, wonderful times.
No sense then of boss and employer, and much, much more than that.
Well,
Head
no.
of state, your Queen and subject.
It was clearly Your Majesty and Mum, but somebody asked me this afternoon, I was giving a talk to a U3A group about my life with the Queen, and somebody asked me, has the Queen ever shouted at me? I said, yeah, several times. And 9 times out of 10, and there was a good reason for it, and we got over it and we moved on. But no, I was just so lucky to spend that time with her.
What about Balmoral? You say spending, many happy months up there over the years during those long summers, the barbecues.
Well, Balmoral was, I was so lucky because probably I retired in 2013, and 2008 I was planning to retire and had a job lined up and everything. And went and spoke to the Queen in private and told her I was thinking of retiring in 6 months' time. And she promptly took me out into the hills and had a picnic and sat me down in the blanket and spent an hour persuading me not to retire and to stay on for another 5 years and be the policeman for a Diamond Jubilee year, a Platinum Jubilee year. And, you know, so I had to ring my wife up and say, guess what, dear? I'm not retiring, I'm staying on for another 5 years.
And being the Queen, she had the power to do that. I mean, were there any rules within the Met at the time that you had to retire at a certain age?
Well, strange enough, there used to be. A chief inspector, you had to retire at the age of 56 or 57. They changed it slightly And for me carrying on, I mean, I carried on till I was 62, which is probably a bit long in the tooth. That's why I thought in 2013 I'd better retire, otherwise the Queen will have a 70-year-old protection officer.
Got to ask you about those sticky moments. I mean, you mentioned one of the most, the most memorable, the most difficult, when the barriers were breached, so to speak, at Buckingham Palace. Not just that, Michael Fagan ended up in Her Majesty the Queen's bedroom. What was this, 1981?
82. Yeah, I was part of the team that came in as a result of Michael Fagan. And it was a catalogue of errors. The alarms around Buckingham Palace were completely out of date. They'd go off 30, 40 times a night. So the police had to switch them off and rely on the army and the police to deter intruders. As it happened, Fagan found a blind spot, climbed over the wall, climbed up a drain pipe, got into the stamp room, which gave him access into Buckingham Palace. And, of course, 3 in the morning, the staff were all asleep, there's no one around. And all he was after was alcohol, cigarettes, food. And of course, he did it twice. That was the amazing part. When he was interviewed, he said, "This is the second time I've broken in." And, of course, on the second time, he found his way. He didn't realise, there's not a sign on the Queen's bedroom door, "The Queen sleeps here." It was sheer chance. And in he goes, sits on the Queen's bed. Now, you can imagine if it happened to you and I, we'd wake up alarmed. And the Queen woke up, "Who are you?" And she initially thought it was a member of staff. And quickly got dispelled by that. And fortunately, he said, "Well, who are you?" And then, "What do you want?" And then he said, "Well, I want somebody to eat, want somebody to drink." And the Queen was able to call the police. Fortunately, a footman, Paul Wybrew, arrived on the scene and took him out.
Worrying as that incident was, it's a real insight into Her Majesty's character, isn't it? Just how calm she stayed. There she is, alone with a stranger in her bedroom, and she kept calm and she talked him down.
She did. She talked him down, and she had the presence to get on the phone, ring the... she initially rang her footman, but she couldn't get through to him, so she rang the palace switchboard. "Can you get a police officer sent to my room?" Kept calm. And in fact, it was so calm that the switchboard operator didn't realise, she thought it was routine. Rang the sergeant in the control room, who said to one of his policemen, "Can you go up to the Queen's apartment and see what she wants?" And no urgency. Smarten yourself up before you go. And that's why it probably took him 15 minutes to get there.
Well, Dick, thank you very much indeed. I know you're going to stay with us during the course of the evening, so we'll chat more later.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, in the past few minutes, President Biden's press secretary has given her reaction to news of the Queen's condition.
The President has been briefed and will be updated throughout the day on the concerning news out of the United Kingdom about Queen Elizabeth's health. His and the First Lady's thoughts are with the Queen and her family today. The President also conveyed to Prime Minister Truss during a previously scheduled video conference this morning that he and Dr. Biden are thinking of the Queen, her family, and the people of the United Kingdom.
So that's President Biden conveying his thoughts and prayers to the Prime Minister Liz Truss in the wake of this news about the Queen and concerns over her health. Just to update you, if you're just joining us, Palace spokesman released a statement earlier today saying, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. As a result of that statement, the Queen's close family have been gathering at Balmoral. We have been monitoring the comings and goings, and as far as we are aware, it is just the Duke of Sussex still to arrive. However, he may have arrived unbeknownst to cameras, but that is the situation we understand at the moment. Well, the Prime Minister was notified in the House of Commons of the news. This was as she was briefing MPs about her cost of living rescue plan. Then the Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, gave a statement.
I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment.
The Hoyle addressing the House after the Prime Minister and the Labour leader were informed of the development from Buckingham Palace. It was quite the dramatic moment in the House of Commons, effectively politics being suspended for the day. Let's go live to Downing Street. Our political correspondent Joe Pike has been following events. Joe.
A moment, Sarah Jane, when the atmosphere changed in the House of Commons chamber. The first sign of that was Nadhim Zahawi, a Cabinet Office Minister, passing a note to the PM, also speaking to Lindsay Hoyle. Keir Starmer, the opposition leader, also spoken to. By the body language and by their facial expressions, we knew something concerning was clearly happening. And then, of course, we had the statement from Buckingham Palace and Lindsay Hoyle's response. No response clip on camera from either of the main party leaders. Liz Truss remains working here at Downing Street, her spokesperson saying she has no plans to travel to Scotland. But Liz Truss has put out a message of concern, I think, on Twitter. She has said this: the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. My thoughts and the thoughts of people across our United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time. Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, tweeted, along with the rest of the country, I am deeply worried by the news from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. My thoughts are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time, and I join everyone across the United Kingdom in hoping for her recovery. I think it's worth pointing out that party leaders like Keir Starmer and now Liz Truss will have sensed in the last year a changing in how the Queen does carry out her central constitutional role as head of state. We saw a change in how the state opening Parliament happened, with the Queen not present, not reading her own speech, but her son, the Prince of Wales, doing that. We also, of course, Sarah Jane, saw a change this week with the handover of power. One outgoing Prime Minister tendering his resignation, the incoming Prime Minister Liz Truss being asked to form a government. They did not travel 1 mile from here, from Downing Street to Buckingham Palace. Instead, 500 miles they travelled to Balmoral, to that private, secluded castle, which has been a home for monarchs back to the time of Queen Victoria in the 1850s. Certainly, there was also a sign last night when the Privy Council meeting that the Queen was supposed to be leading and chairing was postponed. That would have been happening virtually using video conferencing software. The Privy Council being a group of senior government advisers, but that did not happen. Now, there's no big constitutional problem because that is a delay, but it was perhaps another sign. I think it's also important to reflect the very important role the Queen clearly has provided and continues to provide to Prime Ministers, providing wisdom and counsel, which is valuable partly because of her longevity, because she has spoken to known Prime Ministers through significant times of change, significant times of crisis, and many of those figures, if we talk of Winston Churchill or Anthony Eden or Harold Macmillan, many of those people who've long since left this earth are now figures in history books. People whose decisions historians, school children, university students debate over. It is a sign of her longevity that she's been providing that role for 7 decades, that she is in her 10th decade. I spoke to one cabinet minister in the last few minutes who said it's important to stress the government don't know anything. Buckingham Palace are in charge. They will remain in charge. And this cabinet minister certainly said that the government will know as soon as the rest of us do, as soon as any update comes from Buckingham Palace. If you talk to politicians who've met the Queen and have some sense of her, what they speak of is warmth, a familiar face, but also, Sarah Jane, I think it's important to stress, she remains a bit of an enigmatic figure, and the fact that she is now surrounded by her family in her private residence, where she has relaxed with family over decades, feeds into that picture of the Queen.
We have some very important news. Buckingham Palace has just announced that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has died. She was 96 years old. The Queen died just a few moments ago, the announcements at Balmoral. She was the longest reigning monarch in British history and the world's oldest head of state. Her eldest son and heir, Charles, the former Prince of Wales, is now the King. Now, if you're joining us, this was the news in the last few moments. Buckingham Palace has announced that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has died. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, joins me now. Rhiannon, your thoughts?
So it has just been confirmed via social media, their website, in which the royal family have said the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. They add the King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. This will clearly come as devastating news for the royal family and millions of people across the United Kingdom and around the world. Queen Elizabeth II was a much-loved and respected monarch and a truly unique figure on the world stage, a head of state without equal, admired not just here in the United Kingdom, but across the globe by members of the public, politicians and religious leaders. Many of us will simply not remember a time when she wasn't our head of state, and she was a constant figure in every aspect of national life. From becoming Queen when she was only 25, she then went on to become Britain's longest reigning monarch and displayed this unwavering commitment to her country and her Commonwealth throughout what was a truly record-breaking reign. Now, her dedication to that constitutional role was never questioned, but her family were just as important to her as a devoted wife, mother, grandmother and great-grandmother. And their admiration for her was always so clearly seen when she was surrounded by her family, when we saw those moments of great national celebration and reflection. It's worth saying that for many, her reign will forever be defined by what was a selfless sense of duty. But it wasn't about her own personal power, privilege or entitlement. This was a role that she felt that she was born to fulfil. Her quiet and restrained demeanour was always guiding her family and the United Kingdom through what was an extraordinary period of social and political change. But throughout all of that, she was always conscious of keeping the monarchy relevant. And while respecting as well and upholding important traditions, she often showed this adaptability that many will now credit with securing the future of the institution. It is worth saying that her old age really should not detract from the enormity of this news and the huge constitutional change that her death now brings. For nearly 70 years, she was this symbol of stability and continuity, and for so many, always a figure of national pride who really embodied those values of public service and duty well into her 90s, and as we saw this week, until the very end. Now, the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms will witness a period of reflection and constitutional change, which many of us will never have experienced in our lifetime, as we now mourn the death of Queen Elizabeth II and witness the succession of her son as the new king.
And Rhiannon, we last saw Her Majesty the Queen in public, of course, just 2 days ago, when she asked Liz Truss to form her government, to become her 15th Prime Minister.
It was remarkable. We saw, until the end, really, that determination to simply carry on with her constitutional duties. And no, she wasn't able to travel down to London to appoint her 15th Prime Minister, as she had done with all of her other Prime Ministers throughout her 70-year reign. But she wanted to make sure that she was seen by members of the public to be continuing on with those constitutional duties. And we saw that in practice there, the Queen reaching her hand out to appoint Liz Truss as her 15th Prime Minister. I think that is why this announcement of her death will be such a shock to so many. But over the last 12 months, there is no doubt that we have seen a gradual slowing down, a gradual change in the duties that she felt that she was able to carry out. I think it was important for her to be seen to carry out that handover of power between prime ministers, because we hadn't seen her in public for quite a long time. She'd obviously travelled up to Scotland, where she was enjoying her summer break. Previously, the last time that we saw her was when she visited a hospice, accompanied by Princess Anne, and that was in July. And we saw with her, she was there, once again, carrying that stick, because we know over the last 12 months she was having difficulty with her mobility, the palace often describing it as episodic mobility problems, which did mean that sometimes she wasn't able to attend certain engagements. But I think what was striking there is to see Princess Anne alongside her. And that has been a theme that we have witnessed right throughout the last 12 months, is the family being there to make sure that when she felt she was able to go out and meet the public, as she has done, as she did right throughout her 70-year reign, they could support her and they could be there in any way that they needed her. And of course, we had the Platinum Jubilee just months ago, the first British monarch to ever mark that remarkable milestone. And we were wondering around that weekend how much we would be able to see her because of the difficulties that she'd been having. But I think you could see that she wanted to make that effort. She knew the crowds once again had come out to mark that milestone moment with her. But also that Platinum Jubilee was so central in the Queen showing her wishes for the future. There alongside her were those central key members of the royal family that she knew she was passing on those responsibilities to. The Prince of Wales, the Duchess of Cornwall, the Prince of Wales, it has to be said, now our new king, and to the other side of her, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and their 3 children. In those images, there was a very clear message from the Queen, a sense of future-proofing the monarchy, as she did right throughout those 7 decades, saying, this is my family, who I love very much, who I trust, who have shown already how committed they are to you, the public, how committed they are to the country and the Commonwealth, and you should trust them when it comes to me stepping back from my responsibilities. Today, of course, though, the family will be around her. They have all travelled to Balmoral to be alongside her as now we mark her death.
Just to repeat that statement released a short time ago by Buckingham Palace, that the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. And Rhiannon Mills, our royal correspondent, is still with us. And of course, Rhiannon, this is the way things work in Britain, in the United Kingdom. With her death, we now have a king.
We do. We have a hereditary monarchy. And this, I think, is something that will potentially come as a shock to some across the country. As soon as Queen Elizabeth II took her last breath, we had a new king, and that is her son and heir, formerly the Prince of Wales, and now King Charles. We do wait to find out what name he takes. There is a potential that he may change his name to a different regnal name, but we await that announcement in the next hours, days to come. But in the coming days, we will see the pendulum swing in many ways between mourning the death of Queen Elizabeth II and the welcoming of a new king. We are going to see spectacular pageantry that many of us have never witnessed before. The Accession Council is where he will be made officially the new king, where he will be sworn in. That will gather at St James's Palace. We wait to see exactly when that will take place, but that will formally mark his succession, and we will witness him taking his oath, and it is at that moment that he will be proclaimed as king. I think what is striking is that at a time when most people would have retired, he is now stepping into a role that he's spent his entire life preparing for. And we have had a very long time to get to know him as the Prince of Wales, and now we will adapt to him as our new king.
So familiar and yet so totally unknowable, Hugo. This famous phrase, not letting daylight in upon the magic. She has lived by that, hasn't she?
Yes, she has. I mean, by not expressing her views in public, of course, she's perfectly capable of expressing them in private, and by and large, people have respected that. I think sort of the Commonwealth thing you were just mentioning is terribly interesting. She was called as a family of nations, and they, in a way, what she's witnessed and helped is a sort of change from, as it were, empire to a group of countries that like to come together for trade, for sport and all those things. It is terribly, terribly important. The other thing which I think you'll find in the course of her reign is that, and I don't know how long it took me to realise this, that she's a tremendous conciliator. She's been a great one, even from the early part of the reign, for saying things like, well, we cannot change the past, but we can build bridges to the future.
Chris?
Yes, I completely agree with you that you know, I think the country, the reason why there's been this sort of outpouring of affection for the Queen following the announcement from Buckingham Palace today is because of the service that she's given and everything that she has done for this country over so many years, 70 years, as we celebrated only a few weeks ago.
Yes, and generations have come and gone, and they might have, from time to time, thought, well, this Jubilee won't be as popular as the last one, but every year people turn out, every time there's a landmark
I think
occasion.
That's right. And if you talk to people in the palaces, they say exactly that. They're always worried about the Jubilee. Will people come? Well, I know for myself, I was there on the Mall when it happened. People did come and people did celebrate in the way that they did.
All right, Chris and Hugo, thank you. And I'm afraid to say in the last few moments, the following statement has been released. It reads, I will find that statement for you. The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort remain at Balmoral this evening. and will return to London tomorrow. So let's take a moment to reflect on that news. So let me just now repeat that statement from the royal household, which we have received in the last few minutes. It reads, "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow." And so the reign of Elizabeth II comes to a close after 70 years at the age of 96. Her son Charles is now king. For most of us, she has been the only monarch we have ever known. Her reign has been the longest and, in the view of many, one of the most successful in British history. Since her coronation in 1953, the young woman who became our Queen at just 25 years of age set the standard by which future monarchs will be judged. She protected and she preserved the institution of the monarchy in turbulent times while shaping it for the future. A life devoted to public service that has endeared her to people both here, across the wider Commonwealth and indeed the world. And we will continue our live programming to reflect on the Queen's remarkable 70-year reign as we enter a new era under the new King. And our royal editor, Chris Shipp, joins me now. First reaction, Chris.
Mary, we have been talking this afternoon about the significant statement from Buckingham Palace at lunchtime today. I think this was the news that everyone dreaded, but the news that came just in the last few moments, a very short statement that she died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. We now have a king and a queen consort who will remain at Balmoral. We are talking, Mary, about an extraordinary life, and this is a very sombre moment for the nation. We are reflecting on someone who was head of state for 70 years, for 7 decades, and at this moment we are all witnesses to history. Most people who live in this country can remember no other head of state, no other monarch other than Queen Elizabeth II. As we have been discussing, she was working until the very end. Only 2 days ago, there at Balmoral Castle in the drawing room, the pictures of the Queen meeting her 15th Prime Minister. This is a live shot of Buckingham Palace where the Union flag has been lowered to half-mast. Now, at every royal residence, the flag will be lowered to half-mast, apart from at Balmoral, where the King's standard will still be flown at the top of the mast. It's difficult. There we have Downing Street again, the flags at half-mast. Now, flags will stay in this position for the next 10 or 11 days and will only be raised again the day after the Queen's funeral. mourning will take place for that period of time. Royal mourning, however, Mary, will continue for about a month. We were seeing pictures just 2 days ago of the Queen working until the very end. The Queen meeting her 15th Prime Minister, Liz Truss, from whom we will expect a statement in the next few moments. And a year when the country was celebrating the 70-year reign of the Queen, the Platinum Jubilee, when tens of thousands of people turned out to show their appreciation over the long Jubilee weekend. But we now have a king. We are presuming he will reign as King Charles, but we will wait for an announcement from Buckingham Palace. And the king at the moment remains at Balmoral.
Chris, it is a moment in history, isn't it? The end of a life of service and duty to Crown and country.
I mean, she had this role as head of state. She also had a very important role as head of a nation, and in that it was someone around whom national identity has been formed, Mary. And I think many people identify as British in part because of the Queen and the role that she has played over the last 7 decades. Just think about those balcony appearances at Buckingham Palace. They were always national moments. They were always moments that brought the nation together. We most recently saw that in June. This was after Trooping the Colour in June, when, whether you're a passionate supporter of the monarchy or not, her appearance on the balcony of Buckingham Palace was always a moment for the country to come together. Think also all the way back to her coronation in 1953, the first to be fully televised, and made her the focus of not just a national celebration and national pride, but an international focus for the Queen and for this country at a time when Britain was still reeling from the effects of the Second World War. We now will have another coronation in due course. When we speak about historic moments, we will have to have a coronation for the new king, which is what Prince Charles became at the